Hi guys, and welcome to America History Tales. Tonight the first thing you notice is the stillness before the heat arrives. You stand on the wide porch of the big house just as the sky begins to thin, from black to deep blue, the air heavy but not yet punishing. Cicadas pause as if holding their breath. Somewhere far off a rooster misjudges the hour. You probably imagine this place as grand slow, almost romantic. You probably will not survive this illusion for long. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are settling in, let me know where you are listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights and let your attention drift forward with the morning as it begins to move, whether you are ready or not. You lean against a porch column, feeling how the wood holds yesterday's warmth. The house behind you sleeps a little longer, protected by thick walls and distance. Out ahead, beyond the trimmed yard and the carefully placed oak trees, the plantation stretches wide and quiet, waiting. This is not the calm of rest, it is the calm of preparation. Even before the sun appears, the day has already been decided. A mainstream historical fact often mentioned is that by the 1850s, plantations in the American South operated on rigid daily schedules, tied closely to daylight. There are no clocks guiding most people here. Time is kept by habit, by sound, by the angle of light on familiar objects. You learn quickly that the porch is more than decoration, it is a stage. From here, authority is visible, elevated, unquestioned. You are meant to see the land from above, not walk it yet. The smell of damp earth rises as the night coolness gives way. You breathe it in, sweet and faintly sour. Somewhere below the porch steps, a bucket scrapes against stone. A door opens and closes softly. The plantation is waking in layers. You realise that while you stood here watching the horizon, dozens of other mornings have already begun elsewhere. You probably assume that everyone wakes together. That is not how it works. Some bodies move earlier than others. Some are expected to be ready before the light reaches the tree line. This is one of the first lessons of the day. Time belongs to some people. Others are borrowed by it. Historians still argue whether plantation owners truly believe their own stories about benevolent order or whether the rituals of the morning were always understood as performance. Standing here, you feel how carefully this performance is arranged. The porch rail is polished. The steps are swept. Even at dawn, appearances matter, especially at dawn. A breeze moves through the trees and carries the faint smell of cooking cornmeal from somewhere you cannot see. It reaches you and fades like a reminder not meant for you. You notice how hunger feels different when you know food is coming. Anticipation softens it. For many others on this land, hunger wakes alongside them, already familiar, already patient. A quirky tidbit, sometimes overlooked, is that many plantation owners prided themselves on being early risers, believing it demonstrated moral superiority and discipline. Rising early was treated almost like a virtue badge, even though much of the hardest labour began long before the owner ever stepped outside. You shift your weight and feel the irony settle in with the humidity. As the sky brightens, colour slowly returns to the world. Green deepens, shadows retreat. The plantation reveals itself inch by inch. You see fences that mark control more than boundaries. You see paths worn smooth, not by wandering, but by repetition. Each path leads somewhere specific and nowhere else. You listen more carefully now. The quiet is not empty. It's filled with small sounds that tell you how the day will unfold, footsteps that do not linger, murmured exchanges that end quickly, the distant thud of wood meeting wood as someone tests a tool before use. No one is asking what today will bring. That question was settled long ago. You feel something else too, a pressure that has nothing to do with weather. It sits behind your eyes in your chest. The sense that this place runs on expectation as much as force. People know where they are meant to be, not because they are told every morning, but because the cost of forgetting is well understood. The sun finally breaks the horizon, and with it comes a subtle shift. The air grows heavier, colours sharpen, the pause is over. You straighten instinctively, even though no one has spoken yet. This reaction surprises you. Already the environment is teaching your body how to behave. From the porch, you notice movement in the distance, becoming more coordinated. Figures separate from shadow. Lines form. The plantation is no longer an idea. It is an engine starting up, slow and deliberate. You realise that what you are witnessing is not chaos waiting for order. It is order revealing itself. Scholars continue to debate how much individual personality mattered in shaping daily life on plantations versus how much the system itself erased difference. Watching this morning unfold, you sense the answer may be both. The structure is firm, but within it every movement carries a human weight. You glance back once at the door behind you. Inside the house still feels insulated from the urgency outside. The separation is physical, but it is also emotional. Here on the porch you stand between worlds for a brief moment. It does not last. It never does. As the day fully arrives, the sounds grow louder, more confident. The plantation has shifted from holding its breath to exhaling steadily. You step forward knowing that the calm you felt a moment ago was only ever temporary. The day does not wait for reflection. It moves on, pulling you with it toward the yard, toward the people, toward the routines that will define everything that follows. The first clear signal of the day arrives not as a shout, but as a sound that rolls outward and settles into bodies. A bell rings from somewhere near the centre of the plantation, its tone dull and practical, meant to carry rather than inspire. You feel it more than you hear it, a vibration that tells you the waiting is over. Conversations that never fully started end immediately. Feet begin moving with purpose. The morning has crossed an invisible line. You realise quickly that time here is not abstract. It is audible. It is physical. The bell rings again, and you understand that it is not asking anyone to wake up. It assumes they already are. This is how time works on a plantation. It does not negotiate. A well-known historical fact is that many plantations relied on bells' horns or overseers' calls to mark the workday, because personal timekeeping devices were rare and unnecessary for most people. Watches existed, but control over time belonged to those who controlled labour. You watch as people orient themselves instinctively toward the sound-adjusting pace without hesitation. You follow the movement toward the yard, noticing how paths feel smoothly like water guided by channels carved long ago. No one rushes. Rushing draws attention. Instead, there is a practiced efficiency to each step. You sense that being exactly on time is less important than being predictably present. The light strengthens, and with it the heat begins its slow climb. You feel sweat gather at the base of your neck before you have done anything deserving of it. Others seem already accustomed, their bodies working ahead of discomfort. You begin to understand that adaptation here is not optional. It is survival. A second sound cuts through the air, shorter this time. It might be a horn or a shouted command carried by familiarity rather than volume. People adjust again. The plantation operates like a clock with no visible face. Every sound is a hand pointing somewhere specific. Historians still debate whether these time signals were primarily about efficiency or control. Standing here, you suspect it is both. The structure ensures productivity, yes, but it also removes the burden of choice. When the bell rings, you move. When it stops, you stop. Thinking is simplified. That is part of the design. You notice children among the movement, some barely tall enough to carry what they hold. Their presence is quite unremarkable, which tells you everything about how normal this is meant to be. Childhood here bends early reshaped by expectation rather than protection. The sun climbs higher and shadows shorten. You learn to read time by where light lands on familiar landmarks. When it touches the edge of the toolshed roof, certain tasks begin. When it clears the trees completely, others follow. This knowledge is passed casually absorbed without instruction. No one gathers to explain it. You are expected to learn by watching. A quirky detail that rarely makes it into textbooks is that some plantations use different bells for different groups, subtly reinforcing hierarchy through sound. One bell might signal field labour, another domestic work, another meals. Even without seeing who moves, where you can tell who the sound is meant for. You listen more closely now, distinguishing tone and timing. You feel the weight of repetition settling in. The predictability is both comforting and suffocating. Knowing what comes next removes uncertainty, but it also removes possibility. There is no room here for lingering, for deciding to take the long way, for stopping to think. As the yard fills, the social order becomes visible. People arrange themselves without instruction. Positions form naturally, shaped by age, skill, and authority. You sense invisible lines that should not be crossed. You are careful where you stand, though no one has told you to be. The overseer appears not dramatically, but as if he has always been there. His presence sharpens the atmosphere. Conversations thin out. Movements become smaller, more precise. You understand that while the bell starts, the day eyes enforce it. Another mainstream historical reality is that overseers were often responsible for maintaining schedules and discipline, acting as the daily enforcers of plantation routines. Their authority rests not just in punishment, but in constant observation. You feel watched even when you are not being watched directly. The yard hums now alive with quiet industry. Tools are distributed. Instructions are minimal. Everyone knows what comes next. You notice how few words are exchanged. Language is efficient here, stripped of ornament. Excess talk wastes time and draws attention. Scholars continue to argue how much agency individuals retained within such rigid systems. As you stand among the movement, you sense small choices being made constantly. Where to step, how to lift, when to glance sideways. These choices are narrow, but they exist. They are practiced carefully. The heat thickens and the smell of sweat mixes with dust and earth. You breathe shallowly, conserving energy without realizing it. Your body begins to mirror the economy of movement around you. Already the rhythm is changing you. The bell rings again, signalling the transition from gathering to labour. The yard empties with the same smoothness it filled. People flow outward toward fields, kitchens, workshops. The plantation stretches itself awake fully now. You pause for a fraction of a second, aware that hesitation is noticeable. Then you move, falling into step. The day has claimed you. Time here does not tick forward. It pulls steadily and without apology, carrying everyone along its narrow path. You feel the day settle onto your shoulders as you dress, not with ceremony, but with habit. Clothing here is chosen less for comfort than for message. Fabric speaks before you do. You reach for garments that have already been shaped by sweat and sun, softened by repetition. There is no mirror needed. You already know how you are supposed to look. The air is warmer now, and pulling cloth over skin feels like a negotiation. Sleeves protect from sun and insects even as they trap heat. Loose fits matter, tight ones punish. You notice how quickly people judge fabric quality at a glance. Clean does not mean new. Clean means intentional. A commonly noted historical fact is that in the 1850s, clothing on southern plantations was a clear marker of class and control. Enslaved people were often issued a limited number of garments each year, usually coarse cotton or wool blends designed for durability rather than comfort. You can feel that durability now. The cloth scratches lightly reminding you that it was not made with ease in mind. You step outside and immediately sense how clothing affects posture. People wearing finer fabrics move differently. Not faster, not slower, but with an ease that comes from not needing to think about wear and tear. Those in work clothes adjust constantly, tugging hems, rolling sleeves, shifting weight to avoid chafing. The body learns to move around discomfort as if it were just another tool. You smell starch and soap lingering faintly on some garments. Cleanliness here is not simply hygiene, it is performance. On the big house side of the plantation, pressed clothing suggests order, morality, and self-control. In the fields, clean clothes are rare, not because of neglect, but because the work defeats cleanliness quickly and without mercy. Historians still argue whether plantation owners understood how deeply clothing reinforced psychological control, or whether they saw it as a practical necessity. Watching the contrast unfold, you sense that appearance does more than separate people. It reminds them constantly of where they belong. A quirky detail that often surprises modern readers is that some enslaved individuals personalised their clothing in small ways. A stitched patch in a particular shape, a bead hidden in a seam, a colour choice when given the chance. These tiny modifications carried identity quietly, almost invisibly. You look closer now, noticing differences you would have missed earlier. The sun climbs higher and the heat presses in. Darker fabrics absorb it greedily. Lighter ones reflect just enough to matter. You feel how material choice can mean the difference between endurance and collapse. No one explains this. You learn it by watching who slows first. Shoes tell another story. Some feet are protected by worn leather, cracked but functional. Others move barefoot, soles hardened and careful. Each step is measured not for speed but for safety. Stones and thorns are familiar hazards. You adjust your gait, copying what you see, lifting your feet just enough to avoid injury. Scholars continue to debate how much agency enslaved people had in choosing their clothing within such strict systems. From where you stand, the answer feels layered. Choice exists, but only within tight boundaries. A head wrap tied a certain way, a shirt repaired rather than replaced. Small decisions heavy with meaning. You become aware of how clothing also dictates where you are allowed to go. Certain spaces seem to repel you if you look wrong for them. The porch, the dining room door, even pathways feel restricted by appearance. You understand now that clothing is not just worn, it is enforced. The smell of cotton plants drifts in from the fields, dry and faintly sweet. It mixes with the scent of bodies already working. Sweat darkens fabric in familiar patterns. Backs, underarms, waistbands. No one comments. This is expected. Cleanliness will be attempted again later with limited success. You notice how children are dressed almost like smaller versions of adults. Function over softness. Durability over comfort. Childhood here does not get its own wardrobe philosophy. It borrows from labour and adapts early. A mainstream observation found in many plantation records is that clothing allowances were often distributed annually, making repairs essential. You see this practicality everywhere. Stitches reinforced, patches layered over patches. Clothing becomes a record of time, each repair marking another season survived. As the morning advances, you feel the weight of your clothes more acutely. Fabric clings. Movement requires more effort. You realise that by midday, clothing will feel like armour you cannot remove. The thought is exhausting. You glance around and see no one pausing to complain or adjust unnecessarily. Complaints waste breath. Adjustments are subtle, efficient. Everything here trains you to conserve energy, including how you dress. The day continues to pull you forward, and with each step your clothing reminds you of where you stand in the order of things. It shapes how others see you. It shapes how you move. It shapes how long you can last under the rising sun. Without needing to be told, you follow the flow toward the next task, fabric, whispering softly, with each step already damp, already marked by the day that has barely begun. The smell reaches you before the food does. Warm cornmeal, faint pork fat, something slightly sour that hints at yesterday lingering into today. Your stomach responds, immediately tightening with interest. Morning work may have already begun for many, but eating follows its own quiet order, just as strict as everything else here. You notice quickly that breakfast is not a shared experience. It is divided carefully, almost invisibly. Where you stand determines not only what you eat, but how, when, and with whom. You are guided by habit rather than invitation. No one announces where to go. You simply know, or you learn by watching who does not hesitate. Records from the period make it clear that meals on plantations reflected hierarchy as much as nutrition. Those closest to the big house eat first, and with greater variety. Others eat later, often quickly, sometimes standing. The difference is not subtle once you start paying attention. It is baked into the rhythm of the morning. You step closer to the cooking area designated for field hands, a space that smells practical rather than indulgent. Iron pots sit low over coals, their surfaces blackened by years of use. Someone stirs without looking up. Movements are efficient, practiced. No one lingers. Food here is fuel, not ceremony. The sound of spoons against tin bowls creates a soft, uneven rhythm. It is the sound of urgency without panic. You taste the cornmeal plain and filling, sticking slightly to your teeth. Salt cuts through it just enough to remind you that flavour exists even if it is rationed. The portion is measured not by scale but by expectation. Enough to last, not enough to feel satisfied. In contrast, you catch a glimpse of the big house table through an open door. Light reflects off polished wood. Plates are heavier. The smell is richer. Coffee possibly, or something close to it. Butter melting somewhere. You do not step closer. You do not need to. The separation is already complete. Researchers continue to debate how much plantation owners understood the psychological impact of these daily meal divisions. Some argue it was intentional control. Others suggest it was accepted custom, rarely questioned by those in power. Standing where you are, the effect feels unmistakable. Hunger sharpens awareness. It teaches you your place repeatedly every single day. A small detail often missed in broader histories is how meals became moments of quiet connection. As people eat, brief exchanges slip through. A glance, a raised eyebrow, a shared joke spoken low enough to escape notice. Food may be limited, but communication finds its way through the cracks. You listen more than you speak, sensing how much is said without words. Children eat alongside adults, learning early how quickly meals can disappear. No one tells them to hurry, they already know. Fingers move fast, bowls are scraped clean, waste feels almost offensive. You notice how even crumbs are treated with respect. Historical accounts describe rations as monotonous but sustaining. Cornmeal, molasses when available, occasionally meat often salted heavily to last. You taste the salt, now feel how it demands water you will not get until later. This too is part of the calculation. Food keeps you going, but it never lets you forget effort. You watch how posture changes during breakfast. Shoulders relax slightly, faces soften for just a moment. This is one of the few pauses the day allows. It does not last long. Someone finishes early and sets their bowl aside without comment. Others follow. The break dissolves as quietly as it formed. An odd but telling habit emerges. Some people save a small portion, tucking it away discreetly. A mouthful for later. A hedge against the afternoon. This is not rebellion, it is foresight. You understand immediately why it matters. Scholars have long discussed whether food sharing functioned as resistance or simple survival. The answer feels less important than the reality. People adapt. They plan. They look after each other in the narrow spaces allowed. As the bowls empty, the sounds change. Utensils clink less. Footsteps return. The smell of food fades, replaced by earth and sweat once more. Breakfast does not end with satisfaction, it ends with readiness. You rinse your hands quickly, the water cool but brief. There is no indulgence here. You wipe them on your clothes already marked by the morning. The energy from the meal settles in not as comfort but as capability. You glance around one last time before moving on. The eating area clears with practiced speed. No one needs to be told. The day presses forward, impatient. As you step away, the memory of taste lingers longer than the fullness. It reminds you that even the simplest moments here are shaped by structure. Who eats, what they eat, how long they sit. None of it is accidental. The sun climbs higher and the fields wait. Breakfast is already becoming a memory folded neatly into routine. You follow the others, knowing the next stretch of the day will demand everything the meal has given you, and then more. As you step fully into the yard, the plantation seems to inhale. What was scattered now gathers. What was quiet now hums. This space between buildings is not empty ground. It is a crossroads where labour authority and human closeness overlap. You feel it immediately, the way sound behaves differently here, how every footstep feels noticed even when no one is looking directly at you. Dust lifts lightly, with each movement hanging just long enough to catch the sunlight before settling again. The smell here is layered: earth, wood smoke, sweat that has not yet turned sharp. You notice how people navigate the space instinctively, angling their paths to avoid collisions, lowering their voices without being told. The yard teaches you how to behave without instruction. Well-documented accounts from the era show that plantation yards functioned as organisational centres, places where tools were distributed, instructions clarified, and order reinforced before work spread outward. You can see that system at work now. Nothing is announced formally, yet everyone seems to know where to go. It is coordination built on repetition. You pass stacks of tools arranged carefully, hoes leaned at matching angles, baskets nested together. Nothing decorative, nothing wasted. Each object has a place and a purpose. You realise that disorder here would ripple outward quickly. The yard is where chaos is prevented before it can begin. Voices move through the air in low bursts. Directions given once, never repeated. Names spoken softly. You hear laughter too brief and contained, like a release valve quickly closed again. Humour exists here, but it stays light on its feet, ready to disappear if needed. Children weave through the adults carrying smaller items, running short distances with practiced awareness. No one scolds them for moving quickly. Speed is sometimes useful, carelessness is not. You notice how early spatial awareness is learned. Where to stand, where not to linger, how to read a shifting crowd. The overseer's presence sharpens the edges of the yard without halting its flow. He does not shout, he watches. A glance redirects someone, a pause draws attention. Control here is economical. Excess force would disrupt the rhythm. You feel the tension of being visible even when not addressed. Researchers remain divided on whether plantation yards fostered any sense of community or whether they functioned purely as sites of surveillance. Standing here, the answer feels complicated. People exchange information quickly, news travels, warnings pass quietly. The yard connects people even as it exposes them. A lesser known detail emerges as you watch longer. Certain individuals linger just slightly after tasks are assigned, using the moment to pass small items hand to hand. A scrap of food, a piece of cloth. Nothing obvious. These exchanges are fast and unremarkable unless you know to look. You realise the yard is not only a place of control, it's also a place of quiet negotiation. The sun climbs higher and the ground begins to radiate warmth upward. You shift your weight, unconsciously mimicking those around you. Standing still too long feels wrong here. Movement signals usefulness. You learn that being seen doing something is often as important as the task itself. Contemporary observers often noted how plantation life depended on constant motion, especially in shared spaces. Idleness attracted scrutiny. Productivity was expected to be visible. You understand now why people keep their hands busy even while waiting, twisting cloth, adjusting tools, anything to suggest readiness. The yard gradually empties as groups peel away toward fields, kitchens, workshops. Each departure feels coordinated, like parts of a machine disengaging smoothly. You notice how silence grows in the spaces they leave behind. The yard does not empty all at once. It thins. Scholarly discussion continues about how much autonomy existed in these transitional moments. Some argue the yard allowed brief social freedom. Others emphasize its role in reinforcing discipline. You sense both truths coexisting. The freedom is narrow, the discipline is constant. You catch the eye of someone across the yard. The look is quick, neutral, but it carries recognition, a silent acknowledgement of shared space, shared understanding. Then the moment passes. Lingering eye contact invites questions. As fewer people remain, the yard changes character. What was crowded now feels exposed. Those still present move more deliberately. You become aware of how sound carries farther. A dropped tool echoes. A cough feels louder than it should. A small group gathers near the edge, waiting for instruction. Waiting is a skill here. You learn to wait without looking like you are waiting, leaning casually, adjusting posture, staying alert without appearing anxious. It is a balance learned over time. The heat intensifies and the smell of the yard shifts. Dust grows drier. Sweat sharpens. The morning's freshness is gone. You realise how quickly the day moves from potential to demand. Eventually, there is nothing left to distribute, nothing left to organise. The yard has done its work. It stands quieter now, holding the imprint of movement like footprints pressed into soft ground. You take one last look around before following your assigned path. The buildings frame the space neatly as if containing what just passed through. Soon, this place will wait again, ready for the next gathering, the next sorting of bodies and labour. As you walk away, you understand that the yard is not just a physical space. It is a lesson repeated daily. Here you learn where you fit, how you move, and how little margin exists for error. The plantation stretches ahead, but the rules you absorbed in the yard travel with you, settling into your muscles as you go. The path into the fields feels longer than it looks. With every step, the openness widens and the shelter of buildings fades behind you. The land stretches outward in patient rows, green, repeating into the distance, until your eyes stop trying to measure it. This is where the plantation reveals its true scale, not as an idea, but as something your body must move through, endure, and keep pace with. The sun is higher now, no longer gentle. Heat presses down steadily, not yet cruel, but already insistent. You feel it on the back of your neck, along your shoulders, settling in as if it plans to stay. The air smells of soil and growing plants, sharp and alive. Insects hum close to the ground. The fields are awake. You take your place without ceremony. There is no dramatic beginning. Tools are already in hands. Movements begin as if they never truly stopped. Rows dictate direction. You learn quickly not to fight their logic. The work moves forward, always forward, measured by distance rather than time. Period accounts consistently describe plantation field labour as repetitive and physically relentless, especially during peak growing seasons. Standing here, you understand how repetition becomes its own kind of pressure. Each motion mirrors the last. Bend, pull, step, straighten. The body settles into rhythm because resisting it wastes energy. You notice how distance works against you. The end of the row never seems to arrive when you expect it. Just as you think you are close, the perspective shifts and more work reveals itself. This illusion wears on the mind. You learn not to focus too far ahead. You focus on the next few steps only. The soil crumbles easily under your fingers. It leaves a fine grit that clings to sweat-damp skin. You wipe your hands on your clothing and feel the fabric darken further. The sun reflects off leaves, creating a shimmer that blurs the edges of things. Heat makes the world feel slightly unreal, as if you are moving through it underwater. Debate persists among historians about how productivity was measured in these fields, whether by volume completed or by visible effort. Watching the work unfold, you sense that effort itself is constantly assessed. Speed matters, but so does consistency. Falling behind draws attention. Racing ahead creates suspicion. The goal is to remain exactly noticeable enough. A detail often overlooked is how silence functions here. Conversation exists, but it is sparse and purposeful. Words cost breath. Breath is precious. When people speak, it is often in short phrases passed down the row. Warnings about snakes, notes about uneven ground, information that helps everyone survive the hour. You begin to understand how bodies adapt. Backs angle just enough to reduce strain. Hands develop calluses that protect but also numb. Movements become economical. No flourish, no wasted motion. The body learns the work faster than the mind does. Time stretches strangely. Without bells or visible markers, hours slide together. You estimate progress by the position of the sun, by the ache in your muscles, by the growing thirst in your throat. Water waits for designated moments. Until then, you swallow and keep moving. Scholars continue to examine whether field labour allowed any personal autonomy through pacing or technique. From within the rows, the answer feels narrow but real. Small choices matter. How you grip the tool, how you shift weight. When you straighten briefly to relieve pressure, these adjustments keep you going. The heat intensifies. Sweat runs freely now, stinging eyes soaking cloth. You breathe carefully, shallow enough to avoid dizziness, deep enough to keep going. The soundscape narrows to breathing insects, the soft scrape of tools. The world reduces itself to essentials. Occasionally you straighten fully just long enough to look around. The sight is overwhelming. Rows stretch in every direction, dotted with bent figures moving in quiet unison. The scale dwarfs individual effort. You feel small, but also aware that the entire system depends on this collective motion. A lesser-known observation from contemporary writings is how some workers marked progress mentally through song prayer or counting steps. You catch fragments of melody drifting faintly across the field, not loud, not performative, just enough to anchor the rhythm. You find yourself syncing movements unconsciously, letting sound guide you. Supervision remains present, though not always visible. You sense it more than see it. A pause too long, a misaligned row. Correction arrives swiftly, sometimes with words, sometimes with a look. The fields tolerate little deviation. As the morning advances, fatigue creeps in quietly. Muscles begin to protest. Focus wavers. This is where experience shows. Veterans of the field adjust pace, subtly conserving strength for later hours. You try to mimic them, learning through observation rather than instruction. The smell of crushed leaves grows stronger as work progresses. Green sap stains hands. Insects scatter and return. The land absorbs everything without comment. It does not hurry you, but it does not wait either. Eventually, the sun reaches a position that signals a brief change. Not rest yet, but transition. Bodies shift. Tools pause momentarily. Someone calls out softly. You straighten, feeling your spine complain as it returns to full height. You take a breath and realize how deeply the field has pulled you in. The world beyond it feels distant now. The porch, the yard, breakfast, all of it seems far away. Here the field defines the present completely. As you resume movement, you understand that the openness you noticed earlier was deceptive. There is no escape in this wide space. Only forward motion guided by rows that lead you deeper into the day. You lower your gaze again, set your rhythm, and continue letting the field claim your attention fully. By the time your hands truly settle into the work, you realize the tools matter less than how you use them. Each one is simple, almost blunt in design, shaped for endurance rather than elegance. Wood handles smoothed by countless palms, metal edges dulled slightly not from neglect, but from constant contact with soil and plant. You grip what is handed to you and feel how quickly your body is expected to understand it. Plantation journals from the period often mention tools as extensions of labour rather than possessions. They are shared, repaired, passed down, rarely individualised. You sense that immediately. No one admires a tool. No one complains about it either. It exists to be used just as bodies here are expected to do. You adjust your grip after the first few motions. The handle rubs a tender spot on your palm. You shift slightly, copying the angle used by the person beside you. This kind of learning happens without conversation. Watching is safer than asking. Within minutes, the motion begins to feel less awkward. Muscle memory starts forming quietly, almost without permission. The work demands consistency more than strength. You discover this as your arms begin to tire. Those who have done this longer do not move faster than you. They move smoother. Their motions waste nothing. Each lift, each pull ends exactly where it needs to. You begin to understand that efficiency here is learned slowly through repetition that borders on monotony. There is an old observation recorded by travellers in the Antebellum South that field labour created a distinct bodily rhythm among workers, one recognisable even from a distance. Watching the rows now, you see it clearly. Bodies move in staggered synchrony, never perfectly aligned, but close enough to suggest shared pacing. It feels almost musical, though no one would call it that out loud. The question of how much skill this work required has long been debated in academic circles. Some early writers dismissed it as unskilled labour. Others argue that such views ignored the physical intelligence involved. Standing here, you feel the truth settle into your muscles. Skill exists here, but it is subtle. It hides in posture, timing, and restraint. A rarely mentioned detail from personal accounts is how people learn to care for their hands obsessively. Not with lotions or rest, but with small habits. Rinsing grit quickly, picking splinters immediately, wrapping cloth around a forming blister before it split. Hands are currency here. Damaging them carelessly costs more than a moment of pain. The sun continues its climb, and with it comes a change in texture. Soil dries further. Dust rises more easily. Your grip grows slick with sweat, forcing you to adjust again. You wipe your hands on your clothes, knowing it barely helps. Still, the motion offers a momentary sense of control. You begin to notice how older workers modify their movements. Knees bend less deeply, backs remain slightly angled rather than fully bent. These adaptations are not signs of weakness. They are strategies learned through years of trial and error. Survival in this space depends on listening to your body without appearing to slow down. Modern historians still disagree about whether plantation labour systems allowed space for individual mastery or whether all distinction was deliberately flattened. From where you stand, mastery exists, but it is rarely acknowledged. Experience earns quiet respect among peers, not recognition from above. The tool in your hand grows heavier as minutes stretch into hours. You feel strain settle into your shoulders, a dull ache that pulses with each movement. You breathe through it, learning to pace yourself internally. No one tells you how long this will last. Knowing would not help anyway. Occasionally, someone corrects your technique with a brief gesture, a nod, a tilt of the wrist. Instruction is efficient here. Too many words slow the rhythm. You adjust quickly, grateful for the guidance, even if it is never framed as kindness. There is a peculiar intimacy in shared labour. You work close enough to hear breathing to sense fatigue before it is spoken, yet conversation remains sparse. Everyone guards their energy. When someone falters briefly, others compensate, subtly closing the gap without drawing attention. This cooperation is practical, not sentimental. An overlooked practice involved marking progress mentally rather than physically. Some count motions, others set small internal goals, reaching a certain plant, a certain shadow. You find yourself doing the same, breaking the vastness into manageable pieces. The sound of tools striking earth becomes steady, almost hypnotic. It dulls thought. You realise this may be part of why the system functions as it does. Repetition quiets the mind. It leaves little room for reflection. Fatigue does the rest. The heat presses harder now. Sweat drips from your chin, darkening the soil briefly before disappearing. Your shirt clings uncomfortably. You resist the urge to straighten fully. You have learned already that unnecessary movement draws attention. There is a moment when your hands seem to move without instruction from your mind. The tool rises and falls, guided by memory rather than intention. This is both relieving and unsettling. You are present, but only just. The historical record remains divided on whether this kind of labour fostered resilience or merely exhaustion. Perhaps it did both. You feel your endurance tested, shaped, sharpened by necessity. At the same time, you sense how easily a body could be worn down beyond repair. As the morning continues, you realise the tool is no longer separate from you. It has become part of your reach, your rhythm. The initial discomfort fades into background sensation. Pain becomes information rather than interruption. You glance briefly down the row and catch someone else adjusting their grip the same way you did earlier. The sight brings a quiet understanding. Knowledge here spreads hand to hand, movement to movement. The field stretches on, unyielding. The work continues without commentary. You lower your gaze again, settle into the practice motion, and let your hands do what they have been trained to do in a single morning. The day is far from over, and the tools in your grasp will not let you forget it. You begin to feel the presence before you clearly see it. The sense of being observed settles lightly at first, like a change in air pressure. Then it sharpens. Someone is watching. Not constantly, not dramatically, but enough that you adjust your movements without thinking. Your back straightens a little. Your pace steadies. You understand quickly that visibility itself is part of the work. The overseer does not need to stand close to exert influence. His authority stretches across distance. He appears at the edge of the field, then further along, moving with a patience that suggests he has nowhere else to be. You notice how people track his location subtly, using peripheral vision, never staring outright. Knowing where he is matters more than knowing what he is doing. Accounts from the period consistently describe overseers as the daily enforcers of plantation discipline, responsible for output timing and order. You see that role play out in small corrections rather than grand gestures. A raised hand, a brief word, a look that lingers just long enough to register. Most adjustments happen before anything is said. Silence becomes a tool here. You realise that quiet is not the absence of communication. It is communication refined. Talking too much risks misunderstanding. Talking too little can appear defiant. You learn to exist in the narrow space between responding when addressed, remaining neutral otherwise. The soundscape shifts when the overseer passes nearby. Tools strike earth a little more evenly, bodies align slightly better. The rhythm tightens. No one announces this change. It happens automatically, like a reflex developed over years. Some historians question whether constant supervision was truly necessary, or whether its power lay mainly in expectation. Standing in the field, you feel the answer settle in your chest. The watching does not need to be constant to be effective. The possibility of watching is enough. A rarely discussed detail is how overseers often relied on experienced workers to maintain order indirectly. You notice certain individuals glance up when someone slows, offering a quiet nudge through posture or proximity. Correction travels sideways as often as it comes from above. This keeps the work moving smoothly, reducing the need for open confrontation. You sense how tension distributes itself unevenly. Newer workers feel it most sharply, their movements careful, slightly stiff. Those with years behind them carry the awareness differently. It sits deeper, woven into habit rather than thought. You begin to feel that shift happening within yourself. The overseer stops briefly scanning the rows. His gaze is not angry, it is assessing. You realize that productivity here is not only measured by speed, but by uniformity. Falling behind draws attention. Standing out in any direction carries risk. Scholarly interpretations continue to wrestle with how much fear versus routine govern behaviour in these fields. The distinction feels thin. Fear may start the process, but routine sustains it. Over time, the body learns what is expected and delivers it before fear needs to intervene. You hear a correction given a few rows away. It is short, almost casual. The response is immediate. No argument, no delay. The exchange lasts seconds, but its effect ripples outward. Others adjust instinctively, not because they were told to, but because they understood the message. Heat adds another layer to this dynamic. Fatigue lowers tolerance for error. You sense how supervision intensifies as the day grows harder. Small mistakes become more visible when bodies slow. You push yourself to maintain pace, knowing that consistency is safer than bursts of effort. An overlooked aspect of this system is how observation moves both ways. Workers watch the overseer too. They learn his patterns, how often he circles, where he pauses, when his attention drifts. This knowledge creates brief pockets of relief moments where tension loosens just enough to breathe more freely. The air feels thicker now, pressing sound closer to the ground. Sweat runs freely. You blink it away and keep moving. The presence remains sometimes near, sometimes distant, but never gone. You realize that even when the overseer steps out of sight, his influence stays behind. Period writings often describe plantation labour as tightly controlled, but they rarely capture how that control feels moment to moment. Here it feels like a constant adjustment, a balancing act performed without conscious thought. You are always calibrating speed, posture, expression. You become more aware of your face, neutral, focused, neither strained nor relaxed. Emotion itself feels risky in this space. You learn to keep it contained, directed inward rather than outward. As the overseer moves on the field, exhale slightly. Not relief exactly, but a loosening. The rhythm remains, but its edges soften. You realize how exhausting it is to be watched even when nothing happens. The vigilance costs energy that could be used elsewhere. Debate continues among scholars about whether such systems relied more on physical punishment or psychological pressure? Standing here, muscles, burning breath, measured the answer feels clear. The pressure is woven into every movement, every pause. It shapes behaviour long before punishment becomes necessary. The sun continues its steady climb. The field stretches on. You lower your gaze again, letting repetition carry you forward. Even without eyes directly on you, you feel the weight of expectation guiding your hands. The work continues, and so does the watching, silent and persistent, stitched into the fabric of the day. The heat settles into its heaviest shape just as the sun reaches its highest confidence. It presses downward and inward at the same time, flattening shadows and narrowing attention. This is the hour when the field feels endless, when the air itself seems to resist movement. You become acutely aware of how much effort it takes simply to exist inside your own skin. Your mouth is dry now, in a way that swallowing does not fix. Thirst becomes a steady companion, not urgent enough to stop you, but persistent enough to colour every thought. You learn to breathe through your nose to keep your mouth from drying faster. Even breathing feels strategic. Many first-hand descriptions from the 19th century note that midday was the most dangerous period for exhaustion, especially during planting and harvest seasons. You understand why immediately. Muscles are already tired. The sun offers no mercy, yet the work does not slow. If anything, it becomes more deliberate, as though the field itself insists on continuity. There are pauses, but they are small and carefully timed. A straightening of the back that lasts only seconds. A hand pressed briefly to the small of the spine. A shift of weight from one foot to the other. These moments are not announced as rest. They are woven quietly into motion, invisible unless you know to look for them. The soil is hot enough now to warm your palms through the handle of the tool. The metal radiates heat upward, forcing you to adjust your grip again. You wrap your fingers with cloth torn from an old shirt, a simple solution passed down without explanation. It helps a little. The historical record contains repeated references to short midday breaks on some plantations, though their length and consistency varied widely. Some sources describe brief respites. Others suggest work continued almost uninterrupted. From where you stand, the truth feels uneven. Relief exists, but it is fragile and conditional. A faint breeze moves through the rows, barely strong enough to stir leaves. When it reaches you, it feels like a gift disproportionate to its strength. You lift your face, slightly eyes closed, for just a moment, letting it pass over your skin. Then it is gone, and the heat returns full and unyielding. People grow quieter now. The already sparse conversation thins further. Energy is conserved fiercely. You hear breathing more clearly. Short, controlled breaths. No one wants to draw attention by sounding strained. You follow suit, counting your steps, regulating your pace. An easily overlooked habit during these hours involved what workers called stealing shade. It might mean angling your body just enough to let your own shadow cover your hands, or timing a bend so your head dips briefly out of direct sunlight. These adjustments are small, but they matter more than you would expect. Scholars have long questioned how much these brief pauses and tricks contributed to long-term survival versus simply delaying collapse. Standing here, you feel their importance immediately. Without them, the body would rebel. With them, you endure just barely. Sweat drips steadily now, tracing familiar paths down your face and back. It soaks your clothes completely, making them heavy and slow to move in. Salt stings your eyes. You blink hard and keep going. Stopping to wipe your face would break rhythm, and rhythm is protection. Someone a few rows away stumble slightly, catching themselves before falling. The moment passes without comment. No one laughs. No one scolds. The stumble is absorbed into the field, another small imperfection smoothed over by collective motion. Midday has a way of bending time. Minutes stretch. Your sense of progress dulls. You stop thinking in terms of how much remains and focus, instead on what is directly in front of you. The next plant, the next step, the next breath. Anything beyond that feels too large. The sound of insects grows louder, filling the air with a constant vibrating presence. It becomes almost soothing, masking the scrape of tools and the effort of movement. You let the sound wash over you, using it as a metronome for your work. Accounts written later by formerly enslaved people often emphasize how the midday sun tested will as much as strength. You feel that now. Your body can still move. It is your mind that wants to wander, to complain, to count grievances. You learn to quiet it deliberately. A small human detail surfaces as you watch others. Some chew on bits of straw or grass, not for nourishment, but to keep the mouth busy and saliva flowing. You try it when no one is watching. It helps more than you expected. The sun hangs overhead, seemingly unmoving. Shadows nearly disappear. The field feels exposed, stripped of depth. You feel as if you are working inside a flat, blinding painting, every movement outlined sharply against the light. Modern researchers continue to debate how often heat-related illness was acknowledged or treated on plantations. The evidence is scattered, incomplete. From inside this moment, you suspect many cases were simply endured unnamed, folded into routine until bodies could no longer keep up. Your muscles tremble slightly now, especially in the legs. You adjust stance again, spreading weight more evenly. Experienced workers do this without thinking. You imitate them grateful, for example, rather than instruction. Finally, there is a subtle shift. Not a full break, but a signal. A call travels softly down the rows. Tools pause. People straighten slowly, carefully, as if standing too fast might cause the world to spin. You take a deep breath, feeling your lungs expand fully for the first time in what feels like hours. Water appears carried in heavy containers. It is warm, metallic tasting, but it is water. You drink slowly, knowing better than to rush it. Each swallow feels restorative, grounding you back in your body. The pause is brief, always brief, enough to reset, not enough to recover. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, feeling grit mix with sweat. The container moves on. As work resumes, you notice something subtle. The worst of the heat has passed. It will remain hot, yes, but the sun has begun its slow descent. The day has crested. You lower your gaze again, return to the rhythm, and feel a quiet determination settle in. You have survived the hardest hour. The field has not released you, but it has loosened its grip slightly. With that knowledge, you continue carrying yourself forward through the rows, aware that endurance here is measured not in triumphs, but in simply making it to the next change in light. As the afternoon stretches on, sound begins to change its role in the field. Earlier it was practical, warnings, brief directions, breath measured carefully. Now something else threads its way through the rows. A voice rises, not loud, not calling attention to itself, but steady. It carries on the warm air, low and rhythmic, folding itself into the scrape of tools and the hum of insects. You do not turn your head. No one does. The sound is acknowledged without being stared at. It moves across the field like a current passing from one row to the next. Another voice joins it, then another, each entering at a slightly different moment. The result is not a song in the way you might expect. It is layered, patient, built for endurance rather than performance. Accounts left by formerly enslaved people repeatedly describe work songs as a way to regulate pace and share feeling without drawing unwanted attention. Standing here, you feel how naturally the rhythm settles into your body. Your movements align with the sound without conscious effort. Bend, pull, step. The cadence does some of the work for you. The lyrics are difficult to make out at first. Some words are swallowed by distance. Others are repeated often enough that you catch them. They speak of travel, of waiting, of time passing. Nothing explicit, nothing that could be easily challenged. Meaning lives in tone as much as content. You realise quickly that the songs are not spontaneous. They follow familiar patterns, call and response. A lead voice carries a line. Others answer sometimes with words, sometimes with sound alone. This structure keeps everyone connected without forcing anyone to speak more than they have strength for. The interpretation of these songs has long remained unsettled among historians. Some view them primarily as tools of labour meant to coordinate movement and reduce fatigue. Others emphasise their role as emotional release or coded communication. Working alongside the sound, you suspect all of that can be true at once. Your breathing adjusts to the rhythm. It becomes easier to maintain pace. The ache in your shoulders fades slightly into the background. Music does not remove the labour, but it reshapes how you experience it. The field feels less isolating now, even though no one looks up. A small but telling detail preserved in oral histories is how certain songs shifted depending on who was nearby. Faster tempos when supervision was close, slower, heavier tones when distance allowed. You listen carefully and notice subtle changes as the afternoon progresses. The music responds to its environment just as the workers do. Sweat continues to run freely, but your awareness narrows. The sound gives your mind something to hold on to. It prevents thoughts from scattering toward exhaustion. You understand now why silence earlier felt heavier. Sound creates a shared space, even in labour. You catch yourself humming softly under your breath. Not the words, just the pattern. It feels instinctive, almost necessary. No one reacts. This is normal. Participation does not require volume. Presence is enough. Plantation records from the era often ignored or dismissed these songs, describing them vaguely or not at all. That absence feels intentional now. What happens here does not fit neatly into ledgers or productivity charts. It lives in bodies and breath, difficult to measure, harder to control. The songs drift and shift as people tire. Some voices fall away, others rise. There is no pressure to sustain a perfect sound. The music adapts to the energy available. When the rhythm slows slightly, your movements slow too, but not enough to draw notice. It is a subtle negotiation carried out collectively. Researchers continue to explore whether these musical traditions served as a form of resistance or simply coping. The distinction feels less important from inside the experience. What matters is that the sound offers relief, however brief. It creates a pocket of mental space where the work does not consume everything. An almost throwaway habit emerges as you listen longer. Certain phrases repeat at predictable intervals, marking progress through the rows. Not numbers exactly, but reference points. When the line changes, you know you have reached a certain distance. The song becomes a map as well as a companion. The overseer remains present, but his role shifts slightly here. He does not stop the singing. It is too useful to the work. as long as pace holds sound is tolerated. This quiet compromise allows the music to exist without open challenge. Your muscles continue their steady protest, but the edge softens. Pain becomes part of the background, rather than the focus. You realize how much mental framing matters. The song gives shape to the afternoon, dividing it into manageable pieces. Heat still presses down, but it no longer feels as sharp. Time feels marked, now not by the sun alone, but by verses rising and falling. You lose track of minutes, but not of progress. The field moves beneath your feet, row by row. There's a moment when the song pauses entirely, a collective breath. Then it begins again, slightly altered. A new line, a different leader. The transition is smooth, almost seamless. No one announces it. Everyone follows. The historical record leaves room for debate about how widely shared these musical practices were across different plantations. Evidence varies by region and crop. Standing here, you feel how natural it is, how difficult it would be to remove once established. Your voice remains low, almost internal, but you feel connected. The sound binds the field together temporarily, creating a shared rhythm that carries you forward. Even fatigue feels more bearable when it is experienced alongside others. As the afternoon wears on, the songs thin again, giving way to breath and movement. They have done their work. The field returns to its earlier quiet, but something has shifted. The hours no longer feel as heavy. You straighten briefly and look down the row. Others do the same small acknowledgements, passing without words. The music may have faded, but its effect lingers, stitched into your pace, your breath, your resolve. You lower your gaze once more and continue. The day has taught you another lesson. Even in the narrowest spaces, people find ways to shape their experience, to carry themselves through labour with rhythm, memory, and sound that belongs to them alone. The shift indoors feels almost disorienting at first. After hours of open light and windless heat, the walls close in gently, holding shadows and cooler air. You step across the threshold and notice how sound changes immediately. Footsteps soften, voices lower without instruction. The house absorbs noise the way the field reflects it. Inside work does not slow. It changes shape. Tasks multiply and divide at the same time, each one smaller than field labour, yet no less demanding. You move through narrow spaces where movement must be planned. A chair pulled back too far becomes an obstacle. A door left open interrupts a practiced route. Precision matters here. Written inventories from the era show that domestic labour on plantations involved a complex choreography of cooking, cleaning, laundering, sewing, and service. Watching it unfold, you see how timing governs everything. A pot must be stirred while another cools. Bread must be checked without burning. Water must be carried before it is needed. Nothing waits politely. You feel the difference in your body. Muscles that ached from repetition now complain about bending, lifting, twisting. Heat still clings, but it gathers differently indoors, trapped near ceilings, lingering in corners. The smell is layered, soap and starch, boiling water, old wood, grease that never quite leaves the air. People move with quiet efficiency eyes, scanning constantly. Anticipation replaces instruction. Someone reaches for a bowl just as another finishes using it. Cloth is folded while listening for a call from another room. The house teaches you to think 2 steps ahead. The division of labour is unmistakable. Certain tasks belong to certain hands. Crossing those lines draws attention. You learn quickly to stay within your lane, even when you could help elsewhere. Help that disrupts order is not welcome. Order keeps everything moving. The historical evidence leaves room for differing interpretations about whether domestic work offered better conditions than field labour. Some accounts describe shelter and marginally lighter physical demands. Others emphasise longer hours and constant scrutiny. Standing here, you sense that the trade is uneven. Shade comes with closeness to authority. Closeness brings its own strain. A quietly revealing behaviour emerges as you watch longer. People memorise preferences meticulously. How a drink is poured, which plate is used, when silence is expected. These details are not written down. They are learned through observation and corrected swiftly when missed. Laundry work draws you closer to heat again. Large pots steam steadily, filling the room with moisture. Cloth is lifted, wrung, slapped against boards rhythmically. The sound is sharp and repetitive. Your hands sting from hot water and rough fabric. Cleanliness here is earned with discomfort. Personal letters from visitors occasionally commented on the apparent orderliness of plantation households. They rarely mentioned the labour behind it. You see it now in reddened hands, in careful posture that hides fatigue in movements repeated without pause. The calm surface costs someone else their energy. The question remains open among scholars whether domestic labour allowed for greater interaction and information exchange. From where you stand, the house does function as a crossroads. News passes quietly through kitchens and hallways. A raised eyebrow conveys more than words. Information moves as efficiently as objects. Children appear again here, smaller tasks assigned to smaller bodies, carrying water, fetching cloth, standing ready to relay messages. They learn the map of the house early, which stairs creak, which doors must be opened silently. This knowledge becomes second nature. An often overlooked detail is how sound becomes a signal indoors. A bell does not ring here. Instead, footsteps on a staircase, a cough behind a door, the clink of glass. You learn to read these cues quickly. Reacting a moment late feels risky. Time feels different inside. Without the sun as a constant marker, progress is measured by completion. This room finished. That task crossed off mentally. You realise how easy it would be to lose hours here, moving from one demand to the next without pause. Cooking draws the most attention. Heat intensifies. Scents grow richer. Stirring becomes continuous. You taste nothing unless invited. Food passes through your hands without belonging to you. This distance sharpens awareness of control. Nourishment is prepared where it is not consumed. There is a rhythm to service as precise as any field song. Steps repeat. Doors open and close in sequence. Plates are set and cleared with practiced timing. You move carefully, matching pace to the room rather than your own breath. The academic debate continues over how visible this labour was to those it served. Some suggest it was deliberately overlooked. Others argue it was accepted but undervalued. From inside the work, visibility feels selective. You are seen when mistakes happen. When things run smoothly, you fade into the background. A small human habit surfaces near the end of a long task. Someone pauses briefly, pressing fingers together, flexing joints discreetly. Relief is taken in seconds, not minutes. The body learns to accept short mercies. As afternoon wears on, fatigue settles deeper. Not the blunt exhaustion of the field, but a finer weariness that creeps into focus. You must concentrate harder to maintain precision. Dropping something would break the fragile calm. You move from room to room, guided by need rather than schedule. The house hums softly now, alive with contained effort. Outside the field continues its work, but here labour is folded inward, quieter, no less demanding. A final task completes, and another takes its place immediately. There is no clear ending, only transitions. You wipe your hands again, feeling heat linger in your palms. The house holds onto effort the way walls hold warmth. When you step back toward an open doorway, light spills in, startling in its brightness. You pause for half a second, adjusting. The day has moved on without you noticing. Indoors, time slipped differently, shaped by rooms rather than rows. You take a breath and prepare to move again. The work inside has sharpened your attention, taught you new rules. As you cross the threshold once more, you carry those lessons with you, knowing the plantation asks for adaptation in every space it contains. Children are everywhere once you begin to notice them woven so tightly into the plantation's movement that they almost disappear into it. At first you register them only as smaller shapes, passing quickly through spaces meant for adults. Then you realise how essential they are to keeping everything running. Their presence is not occasional, it is constant. They wake early, often earlier than you expect, slipping out of crowded sleeping spaces, while the air is still cool enough to feel kind. You see them carrying messages, fetching water, minding younger siblings, performing tasks that look simple until you try them yourself. Nothing about their work is framed as learning. It is framed as necessary. By the middle of the 19th century, it was widely accepted across southern plantations that children would contribute labour as soon as they were physically able. The type of work changed with age, but the expectation did not. You see how quickly skill replaces play. Movements are purposeful. Curiosity is directed toward usefulness. Their clothing tells part of the story. It mirrors adult workwear in smaller sizes, durable, mended repeatedly, designed to survive strain rather than childhood mess. You notice how rarely clothes are outgrown before they are worn through. Growth here is measured against labour needs, not comfort. Children move with a different energy, faster, but also more careful. They learn early where they are allowed to be and where they are not. Boundaries are memorised rather than explained. A look from an adult is enough to redirect them. You watch this silent communication happen again and again. The emotional weight of this early responsibility has long been a point of disagreement among historians. Some argue that shared labour fostered resilience and communal bonds. Others emphasise the cost of lost childhood and constant pressure. Watching these young figures work, the cost feels immediate. There is competence here, yes, but also a quiet gravity that seems far too heavy for their size. A detail preserved in personal recollections describes children learning tasks through imitation rather than instruction. You see it play out now. A child watches an older sibling tie a bundle, tries it once, fails, tries again without comment. Mastery arrives not through praise, but through repetition. You notice how children are often tasked with waiting. Waiting is not idle here. It requires attention. A child stands near a doorway, listening for a call. Another waits beside a path, ready to carry something the moment it appears. They learn patience, not as virtue, but as function. During meals, children eat quickly, mirroring adult urgency. There is little encouragement to linger. Food is consumed with the same efficiency as everything else. You notice how even laughter is brief, rising suddenly and falling away just as fast. Joy exists, but it moves lightly, careful not to take up too much space. Records from plantation owners occasionally praise children for being helpful or obedient, often in the same tone, used to describe tools or livestock. This language reveals more than it intends. You sense how easily individuality is flattened when usefulness becomes the primary measure of worth. One quietly revealing habit involves games played during work rather than apart from it. A child turns carrying water into a race with themselves. Another counts steps between tasks. Play does not disappear entirely. It adapts, folding itself into labour wherever it can fit. As the afternoon wears on, fatigue becomes visible even in young bodies. Shoulders slump slightly, steps slow, yet expectations do not soften. You see older children compensate, guiding younger ones, gently adjusting loads, sharing glances that communicate more than words. Researchers still wrestle with how children understood their own roles within this system. Did they see labour as normal, or did they recognise its weight? The answer likely shifts with age. Younger ones move easily within routine. Older children show awareness in their eyes, a sense of constraint that deepens quietly. Education, when it exists at all, arrives unevenly. Some children learn letters in stolen moments, others never do. Knowledge here is practical first. Reading, if learned, is secondary to survival. You watch a child count tools quickly, accurately. Math learned through necessity rather than chalk. You notice how children learn silence early. Questions are rare. Observation replaces inquiry. They read moods, anticipate needs, adjust behaviour accordingly. This emotional awareness is sharp, honed by environment. It is impressive and unsettling at the same time. A small interaction stays with you. A child drops something and freezes, waiting. An adult looks over, expression unreadable. Then with a slight nod, the child retrieves the item and continues. No words are exchanged. Relief passes like a shadow and is gone. As evening approaches, children remain active. Their energy seems elastic, stretching to meet demand. When rest finally comes, it is sudden. They sit where they are, leaning against walls, heads tipping forward without ceremony. Sleep arrives easily when the body is empty. The scholarly conversation continues about whether children form distinct social worlds within plantations. You glimpse fragments of that world in shared looks, whispered jokes, hands briefly clasped before separating. Connection survives even under weight. When night draws closer, children gather into familiar clusters, gravitating toward older siblings or caretakers. The day has shaped them again, adding another layer of experience to bodies already carrying too much. You realise that childhood here is not marked by milestones you recognise. It is marked by competence, by how well one performs a task, by how little attention one draws. Growing up happens quietly, measured in responsibilities accepted rather than years past. As you move on, the image lingers. Small figures navigating a world built for endurance, learning rules without explanation, adapting without complaint. Their presence changes how you see everything else. The plantation does not run around them, it runs through them. Hunger returns differently in the afternoon. It is quieter than the morning version, less insistent, but more draining. You feel it as a soft hollowing just beneath the ribs, a reminder that the energy from breakfast has been spent carefully and completely. When food comes again, it will not be generous, but it will matter. Preparation begins long before eating. You notice how people talk about food without naming it directly. A glance toward the cooking area, a comment about time passing, an awareness that the next task will end soon. Meals are anticipated collectively even when they are eaten separately. Surviving plantation correspondence shows that rations were often planned with strict efficiency, calculated to sustain labour rather than comfort. Cornmeal appears again, familiar and dependable. Beans simmer slowly. Fat, when available, is stretched thin, used sparingly to carry flavour further than its quantity suggests. You watch the cooking process unfold with practised precision. Pots are stirred just enough to prevent sticking. Lids are lifted briefly, heat escaping in thick clouds. Someone tastes with the tip of a spoon, nods once and continues. Adjustments are minimal. There is no room for experimentation when ingredients are limited. The smell draws you in, warm and grounding. It reminds your body what it is working toward. You feel saliva gather your stomach, tightening in response. Even anticipation carries energy here. One quietly human habit involves seasoning by memory rather than measurement. A pinch added without looking, a shake of salt judged by feel. These small decisions give food personality even within strict limits. You notice pride in these movements, subtle but real. When food is finally distributed, it happens quickly. Bowls are filled in a practiced order. No one lingers at the pot. Eating happens where people stand or sit, wherever space allows. The meal is brief but focused. Each bite is taken seriously. Accounts from the period often described enslaved meals as monotonous. Standing here, you understand that monotony does not equal indifference. Familiarity brings its own comfort. You savour texture as much as taste. The graininess of cornmeal, the softness of beans, the warmth spreading outward from your centre. The question remains unsettled among historians whether food preparation offered moments of agency or simply reinforced dependence. Watching the care taken with limited ingredients, you sense both realities coexisting. Control remains external, but creativity finds narrow paths. Conversation resumes cautiously during the meal. Low voices, short exchanges. Someone shares a piece of news. Another listens intently, nodding once. Food opens a brief window for connection, even if it closes quickly. Children eat alongside adults again, mirroring pace and posture. You notice how older hands guide smaller ones subtly. A bowl shifted closer. A portion divided without comment. Care is offered quietly, folded into routine. An easily missed moment reveals how scarcity shapes behaviour. Someone finishes early and waits watching others. When a neighbour leaves a scrap behind, it is claimed swiftly but without greed. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is flaunted. Scholarly perspectives differ on whether communal eating strengthens bonds under such conditions. From where you sit, the bond feels practical rather than sentimental. Sharing space and time matters even when sharing food is limited. The meal ends almost as soon as it began. Bowls are rinsed quickly, utensils are stacked. No one needs to be told to move on. The body accepts the fuel and prepares for what remains of the day. You feel the difference immediately. Energy returns in a controlled way, not as comfort but as capability. Muscles loosen slightly, focus sharpens. The afternoon no longer feels endless, just long. As work resumes, you carry the taste with you. It lingers faintly, a reminder of care taken under constraint. Food here is not about abundance. It's about continuity, about making it through the next stretch. Later you notice small acts of improvisation. Someone pockets a bean for later. Another saves a crust. These gestures are not acts of defiance. They are calculations, quiet and necessary. The academic discussion continues around how diet affected long-term health and endurance. Evidence varies, shaped by region and circumstance. In this moment, the concern feels immediate rather than theoretical. You eat to keep moving. You move to earn the next meal. As the sun begins to soften its angle, the field and yard shift again. The day prepares for its final demands. You feel steadier now, anchored by nourishment that was simple but sufficient. You wipe your hands on your clothes and take a breath. The afternoon stretches ahead, but it no longer feels empty. Food has done its work. It has given you just enough. With that, you step forward again, joining the flow of bodies, returning to labour. The taste fades gradually, but its effect remains, carried quietly in muscle and breath as the plantation moves toward evening. The afternoon grows heavier in a different way now. It is no longer the sharp resistance of midday heat, but a dragging weight that settles into muscles and attention alike. You feel it in your shoulders first, then behind your eyes. The work continues, but everything takes more intention. Each movement must be chosen rather than assumed. The light shifts subtly, stretching shadows just enough to notice. This is how you know time is passing. Not by clocks, not by bells, but by how the sun begins to lean instead of press. The land looks almost forgiving from a distance, but up close it still demands the same effort. Contemporary observers frequently remarked that afternoons were the most mentally exhausting part of the workday. The body is already taxed, yet the end remains far enough away to feel abstract. You sense that now. Motivation becomes quieter, less emotional. You rely on habit more than will. Your muscles ache in a dull, persistent way. Not sharp pain, but a deep soreness that hums beneath the skin. You shift your grip again, adjust stance, roll your shoulders once when no one is looking. These small acts of maintenance keep you functioning. You learn that ignoring discomfort entirely is dangerous. Acknowledging it briefly, then moving on, works better. The sound of the field changes again. There is less scraping now, more pauses between movements. Not long enough to be noticed, but long enough to register internally. Breathing grows louder. You hear it around you, controlled but strained. Everyone is managing something unseen. A fleeting but telling behaviour appears as fatigue sets in. People begin to mirror one another more closely. If one person straightens, others follow within seconds. If someone slows slightly, the row adjusts collectively. This unspoken coordination smooths the rough edges of exhaustion. The historical literature remains divided on whether afternoons saw more mistakes or more discipline. Some records suggest productivity dipped. Others emphasize stricter oversight during these hours. From where you stand, it feels like both pressures coexist. Fatigue invites error. Error invites scrutiny. You focus harder not because you have more energy, but because you have less margin. You notice how time compresses psychologically. The future shrinks to the next task. Thinking about evening feels premature, almost dangerous. You keep your attention anchored to the present. The plant in front of you, the step beneath your foot, the next breath. Sweat dries more quickly now as the air shifts. Salt crusts lightly at your temples. Your clothes stiffen as moisture evaporates unevenly. You feel the fabric rub differently against your skin, reminding you that the day has already marked you. An easily missed moment reveals how people cope during these hours. Someone hums softly, not enough to be a song, just enough to create a thread of sound. Another counts under their breath, barely audible. These private rituals help structure time when the body begins to resist. Researchers still disagree on how long workdays typically lasted, depending on season and crop. Afternoon labour could stretch unpredictably, shaped by weather and urgency. You sense that uncertainty now. There is no clear signal for how much remains. You prepare yourself to continue as long as needed. Your hands move more slowly, but with greater care. Precision replaces speed. You realise that experience has taught others this lesson long ago. When tired, wasting energy on rushed movements costs more than it saves. The field looks different now than it did this morning. Colours deepen, greens darken. The air feels thicker near the ground, cooler above. Insects change their tone. The environment signals transition even if work does not. A small interaction catches your attention. Someone nearby falters briefly and another adjusts position without comment, closing the gap. Cooperation here is subtle, almost invisible. It does not announce itself. It simply happens because it must. Written testimonies from the period sometimes mention the strange quiet of late afternoon when conversation fades and focus turns inward. You experience that quiet now. Not silence exactly, but a narrowing of expression. Faces settle into neutral lines. Eyes stay forward. Your thoughts wander briefly, then pull back. Daydreaming feels risky when energy is low. You ground yourself again by listening to sound, tools, breath, footsteps. The world reduces itself to manageable elements. There is a moment when you consider how long the day has been. Then you stop. That way leads to frustration. Instead, you measure progress by the angle of light on a familiar tree. It has moved. Not much, but enough. An overlooked aspect of these hours is how they teach endurance without reward. There is no praise for making it through the afternoon. Survival itself is the achievement. You understand now why resilience here is quiet, almost invisible. The overseer's presence is still felt, but it recedes slightly as attention shifts to completion rather than correction. As long as movement continues, oversight loosens. You sense this and maintain steady pace, neither pushing nor lagging. Your body begins to feel strangely light in places, heavy in others. Arms tire legs steady. Focus narrows. You move almost automatically, guided by habit formed earlier in the day. This is both efficient and unsettling. The academic debate persists over whether such prolonged fatigue dulled resistance or sharpened awareness. Inside the experience, the answer feels layered. Exhaustion limits energy for defiance, but it also strips away pretense. What remains is honest, raw, and deeply human. As the afternoon leans further toward evening, a subtle anticipation enters the air. Not relief yet, but the possibility of it. The light softens again. Shadows lengthen more noticeably. The field begins to release its grip slowly. You straighten one last time, stretching your back carefully. The ache remains, but it feels earned now rather than oppressive. You take a breath and return to the rhythm, knowing the hardest part of the day is nearly behind you. The work continues, but its tone has changed. The urgency fades into persistence. You carry yourself forward through the final stretch of afternoon, guided by light habit, and the quiet knowledge that the day is finally beginning to loosen. You sense it more than you see it, the way discipline hangs in the air like humidity. Even as the day leans toward evening, the possibility of punishment never fully leaves. It does not need to announce itself. It exists as memory, as expectation, as a quiet calculation made before every choice. You adjust behaviour not because something is happening, but because it might. The plantation feels alert during these hours. Fatigue increases risk, and risk draws attention. You become careful in new ways, not just about speed or posture, but about expression. A sigh held too long, a pause taken at the wrong moment. Everything carries weight now. Surviving legal documents and personal accounts from the era indicate that discipline was woven into daily routine rather than reserved for dramatic moments. Correction could come swiftly or be delayed, public or private. The uncertainty itself was part of the system. You feel that uncertainty settle into your shoulders, guiding you more effectively than any shouted order. You notice how people scan one another discreetly, not to judge but to anticipate. If someone nearby falters, others adjust instinctively, not out of kindness alone, but to prevent attention from spreading. Responsibility becomes collective in this way. One mistake can ripple outward. There is no single sound that signals danger. Instead, there are small changes. A voice lowered too suddenly. A step that stops. The absence of movement where there should be motion. You learn to read these signs quickly, responding before you fully understand why. The historical record leaves open questions about how often punishment was actually carried out versus how often it was anticipated. Many scholars suggest that fear did much of the work on its own. Standing here, you feel how effective that fear can be. It sharpens focus even when energy is gone. A quietly revealing behaviour surfaces during these hours. People correct themselves out loud, narrating actions softly as they work. Not for instruction, but as reassurance. Naming the task seems to anchor it, reducing the chance of error. You catch yourself doing the same whispering just enough to hear your own voice. As light continues to soften, the stakes do not diminish. In some ways they increase. Mistakes late in the day feel less forgivable, not because they are worse, but because everyone is tired. Tired people are watched more closely. You think about how discipline is taught here. Rarely explained, rarely justified. It exists as a fact of life, absorbed through observation rather than instruction. Children learn it early, adults reinforce it unconsciously, the system sustains itself. An overlooked detail from first-hand narratives describes how anticipation of punishment shaped even private thoughts. People learn to correct themselves internally to suppress reactions before they reach the face. You notice this happening now. Emotion flattens, focus narrows, the body becomes careful. The overseer's presence grows quieter, but no less powerful. He moves less now, observing from a distance. Intervention is reserved for moments that cannot be ignored. This restraint makes each correction feel heavier. When nothing happens, relief spreads briefly, then fades. Academic interpretations differ on whether fear or routine played the greater role in maintaining order. From within the moment, the two feel inseparable. Routine provides structure, fear provides consequence. Together they guide behaviour without constant enforcement. You feel a tightness in your chest that has nothing to do with exertion. It eases slightly when tasks proceed smoothly. It tightens again when something goes wrong nearby. Emotional regulation becomes another form of labour, one that costs energy but leaves no visible mark. A small incident draws attention briefly. A tool slips. A sound carries farther than intended. The pause that follows feels long, even if it is only seconds. Then work resumes. No comment, no escalation. The release is palpable, though no one acknowledges it. This unpredictability keeps everyone alert. You realise that certainty would be easier to manage. Knowing exactly what triggers punishment would allow calculation. Here, the boundaries blur intentionally. Caution becomes the default. As evening approaches, the tension does not vanish. It shifts. People become careful about ending tasks properly, about leaving spaces orderly. Discipline extends into closure. How you finish matters as much as how you worked. Some later scholars have suggested that such constant vigilance dulled emotional life. Others argue it sharpened awareness. Standing here, you sense both effects at once. Awareness deepens, but expression shrinks. Feeling exists, but it is held tightly inside. Your body aches, but you keep pace. You have learned that visible struggle invites scrutiny. Endurance is expected, not praised. You draw on whatever remains guided by habit and caution rather than hope of relief. As shadows lengthen, a subtle easing enters the air. Not safety, but proximity to it. The day is almost complete. That knowledge steadies you, helping you hold focus just a little longer. You take one more measured breath and continue careful to keep movement smooth and unremarkable. Discipline here is not only about punishment, it is about survival within narrow limits. You move within those limits, now aware of them, even as you try not to think about them, carrying yourself toward evening without drawing notice. As the day begins to loosen its grip, another kind of attention comes into focus. You notice it first in the way certain people are positioned differently from others. They are not overseers, not owners, but they carry themselves with a quieter authority. Their movements are confident. Their tasks are specific. When they speak, others listen, even if the words are few. These are the skilled hands of the plantation, carpenters, blacksmiths, drivers trusted to manage teams, cooks whose judgment is rarely questioned. You see how their work interrupts the routine just enough to matter. A broken handle is replaced, a gate repaired, a tool adjusted rather than discarded. Skill buys a small margin of respect here, fragile but real. Plantation records from the period often list such individuals separately, noting their trades and perceived value. This categorization says more than it intends. Skill is acknowledged not as personal achievement, but as utility. Still, you feel the difference immediately. The presence of competence changes the air around a task. You watch a carpenter inspect a warped board, running fingers along the grain before making a decision. The pause is deliberate, protected. No one rushes him. His judgment saves time later, and everyone knows it. You realise that experience can slow the pace in ways brute effort cannot. The question of whether skilled labour offered meaningful privilege has never settled cleanly in historical writing. Some accounts suggest better treatment or lighter workloads. Others emphasise that skill simply brought different pressures. Standing here, you sense both truths at once. Skill shifts responsibility. It does not remove it. A small but telling behaviour emerges around these workers. Others linger nearby under the pretense of being busy watching closely. Knowledge spreads through proximity. How to hold a tool, how to judge a measurement by eye. Learning happens quietly without formal teaching. Passing skill forward becomes a form of survival. You notice how these individuals manage fatigue differently. They pause to think rather than to rest. Their bodies still ache, but their minds carry part of the load. Planning replaces repetition. Precision replaces speed. The work feels heavier in some ways, lighter in others. An often overlooked detail from personal testimonies is how skilled workers sometimes negotiated subtly. A repair done now to avoid greater trouble later. A task delayed just enough to ensure it is done properly. These choices are framed as practicality, but they also assert a sliver of agency. As evening approaches, skilled labour becomes more visible. Repairs rushed earlier in the day are revisited. Tools are cleaned carefully rather than tossed aside. The work shifts from production to maintenance. This transition feels significant. It signals that the day is nearing its end. Scholarly interpretations vary on whether such roles offered long-term stability or simply postponed hardship. The evidence allows for multiple readings. Some skilled workers were protected, others were exploited more intensely. From within the moment you feel the tension. Being needed brings security. It also brings scrutiny. You watch a blacksmith wipe sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of soot across his face. He does not bother to clean it immediately. The mark is temporary, the work is not. His posture suggests pride mixed with caution. He knows his value, he also knows its limits. Conversation flows slightly more freely around these tasks. Not loud, not careless, but there is exchange, suggestions offered, agreement signalled with a nod. Collaboration exists here in a way it rarely does elsewhere. It is practical, born of necessity rather than permission. You feel drawn into this rhythm, adjusting your pace to match the care around you. The frantic urgency of the field gives way to something steadier. Fatigue remains, but it feels purposeful now, directed toward preservation rather than output. A fleeting moment reveals the cost of this position. When a repair fails unexpectedly, attention sharpens instantly. Responsibility concentrates. The margin for error feels smaller here than anywhere else. Skill earns trust, but it also carries blame. As light fades further, lanterns are prepared. The glow softens edges, making movements feel gentler. Skilled hands work confidently in this half-light, guided by memory as much as sight. You realise how much of their knowledge lives in the body rather than the mind. Later historians have questioned whether these roles fostered pride or merely reinforced hierarchy. Watching the careful balance these workers maintain, the answer feels personal rather than theoretical. Pride exists, but it is guarded. Satisfaction is taken quietly, rarely displayed. The final tasks of the day approach. Tools are set down with intention. Materials are stored carefully. There is a sense of closure here that does not exist in the fields. Work ends not because the sun sets, but because the task is complete. You stand back for a moment and observe. The plantation relies on these skills more than it admits. Without them, routine would collapse quickly. Yet acknowledgement remains limited, controlled. As you move away, you carry a new understanding with you. Labour here is not uniform. It contains layers of knowledge, responsibility and quiet negotiation. Skill does not free you, but it reshapes how the day touches you. Even as night draws closer, you feel the imprint of this work settle into you. Precision learned, patience tested, awareness sharpened. The plantation prepares to rest, and with it the skilled hands finally release their tools, knowing they will be needed again tomorrow. The mood shifts before the visitors appear. You sense it in the way people straighten slightly, in how conversations thin out, in how the plantation seems to tidy itself without being told. Even before footsteps sound on the path, the air carries a different expectation. Someone is coming who does not belong to the rhythm of the day. When the visitors arrive, they do not come quietly. Their presence announces itself through posture, through tone, through the way they look around as if seeing the place for the first time. You notice how quickly roles adjust. Movements become smoother. Faces settle into practiced expressions. The plantation begins to perform. Accounts from the era make clear that visits from neighbours, officials or distant relatives were common enough to require preparation, yet irregular enough to cause tension. You feel that tension now. Work does not stop, but it changes texture. Certain tasks are brought forward. Others disappear from view entirely. You watch as the yard is subtly rearranged. Tools are stacked more neatly. A stray bucket is moved aside. Someone sweeps an already clean area again. These actions are not about necessity, they are about impression. You understand that visitors are meant to see order, not effort. Voices lift slightly in volume, becoming more polite, more measured. Laughter appears where it was absent earlier. It feels rehearsed, but not false. This is a version of reality shaped for display. You realise how often life here exists in layers, one visible, one hidden, just out of reach. The visitors ask questions. How is the crop doing? How has the weather been? Are things progressing well? The answers are brief, reassuring, carefully framed. No one speaks of strain or shortage. Optimism is the safest language. The historical record offers conflicting interpretations of these moments. Some scholars suggest they were genuine social occasions. Others argue they function primarily as inspections, informal but influential. Standing here, you sense both purposes overlapping. Conversation feels light, but the stakes remain. A revealing habit surfaces almost immediately. Certain people are repositioned. Those with visible injuries step back. Children are guided away from sight. Skilled workers are kept close, ready to demonstrate competence if needed. The plantation edits itself in real time. You notice how food is handled differently now. Trays are carried carefully. Portions appear slightly larger. Ingredients reserved for special occasions make an appearance. The smell changes, richer and more inviting. Food becomes a statement rather than sustenance. An often missed detail from personal recollections is how these visits created brief confusion in routine. Workers accustomed to clear expectations now navigate shifting priorities. Should you continue your task or wait? Should you speak or remain silent? Uncertainty rises, subtle but real. You catch fragments of conversation that feel oddly disconnected from the labour around them. Discussions of travel, of distant towns, of news carried in from beyond the plantation. These topics float above the ground, untethered to the work beneath them. Listening, you feel the distance between worlds sharpen. The visitors walk slowly, observing. Their gaze lingers on buildings, on fields, on faces. You become acutely aware of how you look from the outside. What does your posture suggest? What story does your silence tell? You adjust without realizing it, aligning yourself with the performance. Scholars continue to debate how much these visits shaped daily behaviour, even after the guests left. Did the performance linger? Did it reinforce expectations? From inside, the moment you feel how quickly habits change under observation. The body remembers this attention later. A fleeting interaction stands out. A visitor comments on how well things seem to run. A nod follows. The words land unevenly. Those closest to the work exchange glances, brief and unreadable. Praise feels strange here, almost dangerous. It risks becoming expectation. Children appear again, but differently, cleaned, arranged, presented. Their movements are more constrained. They are careful not to interrupt. You notice how quickly they adapt, slipping into stillness that feels practiced. As the visit continues, certain sounds disappear. Songs fade. Tools strike more softly. The plantation grows quieter, as if holding its breath. You realise that performance requires restraint as much as display. Written accounts from visitors often describe plantations as orderly, even serene. Rarely did they mention the effort required to maintain that image. Standing within it, you feel the strain beneath the surface. The calm is curated. The serenity is temporary. The question remains unresolved among historians, whether visitors recognised this performance or accepted it at face value. The answer likely varied. Some may have noticed the gaps. Others may have preferred not to look too closely. You sense how easy it would be to accept the surface if you did not know where to look. Eventually the visit winds down. Conversations reach natural conclusions. Goodbyes are exchanged. Smiles linger until the last footstep fades down the path. The plantation waits a beat longer than necessary before exhaling. The shift afterward is immediate and quiet. Shoulders drop slightly. Movements loosen. The performance dissolves without comment. Tools return to their usual places. Tasks resume their original shape. It is as if a layer has been peeled away. You feel the aftertaste of the encounter linger, a mix of relief and fatigue different from physical exhaustion. Performing takes energy, so does suppressing truth. You notice how people avoid discussing the visit directly. It is easier to let it pass unremarked. Later scholars have suggested that these moments reinforce the plantation's power structures by normalizing observation and judgment. Watching the rhythm settle back into place, you sense how accurate that feels. Being watched leaves a mark even when nothing happens. As evening approaches, the memory of the visitors fades into the background, absorbed by routine. Yet something remains. A sharpened awareness, a reminder of how easily life here can be reshaped for outside eyes. You move forward with the rest, returning to familiar tasks. The day resumes its quieter course, but now you understand that the plantation does not only labour, it performs. And that performance, brief as it is, shapes the way everyone carries themselves long after the audience is gone. As the visitors fade from memory, attention shifts inward, again toward the work that never truly left. You begin to notice how much of this plantation depends on women's labour, often layered so seamlessly into the day that it almost disappears. Almost. Once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. Women move between roles without pause. Fieldwork earlier, domestic labour indoors, caregiving threaded through everything else. Their days are not divided into neat sections. Tasks overlap and stack, each one demanding attention at the same time. You sense how awareness must stretch wide to manage it all. Surviving household records and personal accounts suggest that women on plantations carried a disproportionate share of both physical and emotional labour. They cooked, cleaned, nursed, repaired, raised children, and often worked in the fields as well. Standing nearby, you feel the weight of this accumulation. It is not dramatic, it is constant. You watch how movements differ. Strength here is economical. Lifting is done with practiced care. Loads are balanced precisely. Energy is conserved whenever possible. There is little room for waste. You notice how often women work while thinking ahead, anticipating the next need before it arises. A quietly human habit emerges as you observe longer. Hands are rarely still even during conversation. Sewing while listening. stirring while speaking, touching a child's shoulder while watching a pop. Attention splits gracefully honed through necessity rather than choice. The academic conversation has not settled on whether women's work offered greater social flexibility or simply deeper entanglement in the system. Some interpretations emphasize expanded responsibilities. Others focus on increased vulnerability. From where you stand, the reality feels layered. Responsibility brings influence. Influence brings risk. Children orbit these women closely. Instruction happens through proximity rather than lectures. A child imitates a movement, receives a brief correction, tries again. Learning is constant, informal, absorbed through doing rather than being told. You notice how women communicate with one another: glances, small gestures, pauses timed precisely. Words are used carefully, often sparingly. This shared understanding allows coordination without drawing attention. It feels like a quiet network running beneath everything else. An overlooked detail from oral histories describes how women often remembered details others forgot. Who was ill? Who was struggling? Which task could wait? This memory becomes a form of power exercised gently, almost invisibly. You see it now in how work is redistributed subtly when someone falters. Fatigue shows differently here. It does not announce itself loudly. It settles into posture, into the pace of steps, into the way a task is completed more carefully than quickly. You sense how endurance is built not on force, but on adaptability. Researchers continue to differ on how women experienced identity under these conditions. Some argue roles provided meaning, others emphasize erasure. Watching the care invested in daily work, you feel how identity survives in fragments, in skill, in responsibility, in connection to others. You observe how illness is handled. A woman checks a child's forehead, adjusts a schedule quietly. Someone else takes over a task without discussion. Care is woven into labour rather than separated from it. This integration keeps the day moving even when bodies falter. As evening approaches, women's work does not diminish. It changes focus, preparing food, tidying spaces, tending to those too tired to continue. The end of field labour marks the beginning of another phase rather than rest. A fleeting moment reveals the emotional cost. A woman pauses briefly, leaning against a doorway, eyes closed. The pause lasts seconds. Then she straightens and continues. No one comments. The moment passes unacknowledged, but you feel its weight. Historical interpretations vary on whether such pauses were acts of resistance or simple necessity. From inside the day, the distinction blurs. Rest is survival. Survival itself can feel defiant. The light softens further now. Shadows lengthen indoors. Lanterns are lit. The work continues under gentler illumination, but the demand remains. You notice how hands move more slowly, more deliberately, as if conserving what little remains. Conversation loosens slightly among women as the day winds down. Shared fatigue allows small honesty. A joke slips out. A sigh is not immediately hidden. These moments feel precious, earned through effort rather than granted. Later scholarship has emphasized how women's networks sustain communities under extreme pressure. Watching these interactions, you understand how accurate that feels. Support is not abstract, it is practical. It shows up as someone else lifting when you cannot, As night approaches, women gather, children settle spaces, prepare for sleep that will come too soon. Their work frames the transition from day to night, making rest possible for others before themselves. You step back and take it in. Strength here is not loud. It does not announce itself. It holds everything together, quietly absorbing strain so the system does not fracture. As the plantation eases toward evening, you carry this understanding with you. The day has been shaped by many hands, but some have carried more than their share. Their labour does not end when the sun sets. It simply shifts, ready to begin again with the next dawn. Illness moves quietly through the plantation, rarely announcing itself until it must. You notice it first in small adjustments. Someone works closer to the ground than usual. Another leans a little longer on a fence post before moving on. A cough appears, then disappears again, swallowed rather than explained. Health here is not a separate category. It is folded into everything else, managed alongside labour rather than instead of it. By the time symptoms become visible, the body is often already negotiated with them for days. You see how people learn to measure their own limits, carefully revealing weakness only when it can no longer be hidden. There is no formal pause for being unwell. Work bends around illness only when it threatens to stop entirely. The structure of care reflects this reality. Treatment happens where it can. In kitchens, in cabins, in shaded corners of the yard. There is no dedicated space for recovery, only moments carved out of routine. You watch someone check another's pulse, briefly fingers resting lightly at the wrist. No words are exchanged, a nod follows. Decisions are made silently. Plantation life depended heavily on folk remedies and practical knowledge passed through experience rather than instruction. You smell herbs crushed between fingers, vinegar mixed with water, poultices prepared from whatever is available. These treatments are not ceremonial, they are pragmatic, shaped by what has worked before. A small but telling behaviour appears when someone is clearly unwell. Tasks are redistributed subtly. A heavier load is lifted by someone else. A child is redirected away from a demanding errand. The adjustment is quiet, cooperative and temporary. No one names it. Naming would make it visible. Later interpretations complicate how effective these remedies actually were. Some may have helped. Others likely did little beyond comfort. From inside the moment, effectiveness is measured differently. Relief matters. The sense of being cared for matters. Sometimes that is enough to keep someone moving. You notice how fever changes the rhythm of a person's day. Movement slow. Focus narrows. The world seems to press in more closely. Yet even then, people try to remain useful, folding cloth while seated, watching children, passing messages. Contribution becomes lighter, but it does not disappear. An overlooked habit emerges around hydration. Water is shared carefully, passed hand to hand with caution. People drink in small sips rather than deeply saving some for later. Thirst is managed the same way as everything else here, with restraint and planning. Children are especially vulnerable, and you see how adults respond instinctively. A hand placed on a forehead, a blanket adjusted, someone sitting close enough to listen to breathing. Care feels constant even when resources are thin. It is one of the few areas where urgency is allowed. What sickness meant in daily terms varied widely from place to place. Some illnesses passed through with little consequence, others left lasting damage. The record does not capture every outcome. Standing here, you sense how uncertainty shapes behaviour. People watch symptoms closely, hoping for improvement, bracing for decline. A fleeting detail stays with you. Someone hums softly near an ill person, not to entertain, but to create steadiness. The sound is low, repetitive, calming. It fills the space just enough to push back against worry. Music becomes medicine of a different kind. Work does not stop when someone falls ill. It shifts. The absence is absorbed by others, increasing strain across the group. You feel how quickly this redistribution adds weight to already tired bodies. Illness spreads impact even when it does not spread infection. As evening approaches, care becomes more visible. People check on one another more deliberately. Someone carries extra water. Someone else prepares a thicker portion of food. These gestures are small but meaningful. They acknowledge fragility without announcing it. Later scholarship has debated how plantation systems accounted for illness at all. Some argue it was treated as an inconvenience. Others point to evidence of limited but real concern. From within the day, concern feels practical rather than sentimental. A sick body cannot work. Care is given to preserve function as much as life. You notice how quickly people return to routine after offering help. Lingering is risky. It draws attention. Care must be efficient. You learn that tenderness here is measured in actions, not in time spent. Night brings both relief and risk. Fever can rise after sunset. Coughs worsen. Pain grows louder when movement stops. You see how people prepare for this quietly. A basin placed nearby, extra cloth folded within reach, someone staying awake longer than necessary to listen. The smell of herbs lingers in the air, mingling with smoke and earth. It is comforting in a way you did not expect. It suggests knowledge passed down, effort made, someone trying. An almost invisible exchange happens as darkness settles. A look between two people. A slight shake of the head, a decision made. Someone will take the early shift tomorrow, so another can rest a little longer. These arrangements are not written, they are remembered. The reality of health here is inseparable from endurance. Bodies are pushed hard, then patched together enough to continue. Recovery is rarely complete. People learn to live with lingering aches, with shortened breath, with pain that fades but never disappears. You feel the vulnerability of this balance keenly. One serious illness could tip everything. Everyone knows it, even if no one says it aloud. That knowledge shapes how people move, how they care, how they conserve energy. As lantern light flickers across faces, you see signs of strain and resilience side by side. Someone laughs softly despite a cough. Someone else winces and keeps going. Life continues in uneven pulses, adapting moment by moment. When you finally settle into the quieter part of evening, the awareness remains. Health here is fragile, guarded fiercely through habit, cooperation and quiet knowledge. Care does not look like rest. It looks like adjustment. You lie back and listen to the sounds of the plantation at night. Breathing, movement, a soft murmur somewhere nearby. The day's labour has left marks visible and invisible. Bodies carry them into sleep, trusting that morning will bring enough strength to begin again. Evening announces itself gently, not with silence, but with a shift in effort. You feel it when tools are set down more carefully, when shoulders roll slowly instead of sharply, when voices return in low, tired tones. The day has not ended yet, but its edge has softened. This is the hour when work releases its tightest grip and allows you to breathe a little more deeply. A familiar sound travels across the plantation, not urgent like the morning bell, but steadier, almost reassuring. It signals transition rather than command. You notice how people respond differently now. Movements are unhurried. Tasks are finished properly instead of quickly. There is relief in completion even when it is partial. The light changes everything. Gold replaces glare. Shadows lengthen and give shape back to the land. The fields that felt endless at noon now appear gentler, their rows softened by distance and dusk. You take a moment to look, really look, something the day rarely allowed earlier. Daily routines on plantations were often structured to end field labour near sunset, a pattern shaped as much by visibility as by endurance. You feel how natural that boundary is. Working without full light risks mistakes, and mistakes cost more than time. Ending now feels practical, not merciful. Bodies react almost immediately. Spines straighten more fully, hands open and close, testing stiffness. Someone laughs quietly at nothing in particular, the sound surprising even them. Laughter returns first in the evening, tentative but welcome. You move towards the yard again, noticing how it feels differently now. Earlier it was sharp and watchful. Now it feels looser, though not free. People gather in small clusters, sharing space without urgency. The air carries the smell of cooling earth and lingering sweat. A small, easily missed behaviour stands out. People wipe their tools clean before putting them away, even when exhausted. This habit protects tomorrow as much as today. It is a form of care directed forward, a recognition that morning will come whether you are ready or not. Conversation grows slightly bolder. Names are spoken more often. Stories begin, sometimes trailing off midway, interrupted by fatigue. News from the day is exchanged quickly. Who struggled? Who did well? Who will need help tomorrow? Information flows quietly, shaping plans without formal discussion. Interpretations differ on how much freedom evenings actually allowed. Some descriptions paint this hour as relaxed, almost social. Others emphasize how closely behavior was still monitored. Standing here, you sense a balance. The pressure eases, but it does not disappear. It simply changes tone. Food preparation begins again, slower this time. The smells are comforting, heavier than midday. You feel hunger return, less sharp but more emotional. Eating now marks survival of the day. It's not just nourishment, it is confirmation. Children drift closer to adults, their earlier energy fading. They lean against familiar legs, sit on steps, sprawl where they stop. Someone runs a hand through a child's hair without comment. Care becomes visible again as urgency recedes. Lanterns appear one by one as the light fades further. Their glow pools warmly, softening faces and edges. Under this light, everything looks gentler, even fatigue. You understand why evenings feel different. The world shrinks to what the light touches. An understated custom emerges as darkness approaches. People check their surroundings quietly before settling. Doors are secured, animals accounted for, tools stored where they can be found easily in the morning. These actions are routine, but they carry reassurance. Order at night promises stability tomorrow. The overseer's presence becomes less pronounced now, not gone but distant. As long as the day's work is accounted for, attention relaxes. You feel the difference immediately. Shoulders drop, breathing deepens, vigilance loosens its hold. Later writers sometimes suggested that evenings were when people reclaimed a sense of self. The truth seems more modest. Evenings offer space to feel human without being productive. That alone is significant. You sit or stand where you are, letting the weight of the day settle fully. Muscles ache openly now. There is no need to hide it. Everyone feels it. Shared fatigue becomes a form of connection, unspoken but strong. A fleeting interaction catches your attention. Someone offers water to another without being asked. The gesture is simple, almost automatic. Gratitude is acknowledged with a nod rather than words. This exchange says more than conversation could. As supper ends, night deepens. The yard empties slowly. People drift toward their sleeping spaces, unhurried but purposeful. The plantation quiets, not into silence, but into a lower register. Crickets begin their work. Distant voices soften. The academic discussion remains open on whether this quiet offered true respite or merely prepared bodies for another day. From inside, the moment respite feels real, even if temporary. Rest does not have to be complete to matter. Partial relief is still relief. You lie back or sit down at last, letting stillness take over. The ache in your body pulses gently, reminding you of effort expended. It is a familiar sensation now, almost comforting in its predictability. Someone nearby tells a short story, unfinished, fading into laughter and then into nothing. Another hums softly, a tune without words. These sounds mark the day's end more clearly than any bell. As darkness settles fully, you feel the plantation exhale. The work is done for now. Tomorrow waits, but it waits quietly. You allow yourself to remain in this moment a little longer, suspended between effort and sleep. The lantern light flickers, once then steadies. You close your eyes briefly, listening to the rhythm of evening. The day has passed. You are still here. That knowledge carries you gently forward into rest, into the quiet that comes after labour, into a night that promises nothing more than a few hours of peace. Supper does not arrive with ceremony. It gathers itself quietly, shaped by hunger and habit rather than anticipation. You smell it first richer than midday, slower, carrying the comfort of warmth rather than urgency. The day has spent, you and the body recognizes what this moment offers. Not abundance, relief. People settle where they can. Steps, low benches, the edges of doorways. There is no single table that defines the meal. Instead, eating happens in clusters that form and dissolve naturally. You notice how posture changes the moment food appears. Shoulders lower, hands stop fidgeting. Attention narrows to what is held. By long-standing custom, evening meals were simpler than those served earlier, yet they carried greater emotional weight. This was the meal that marked completion. You feel that meaning settle into you as you lift your bowl. The food is familiar. Cornbread beans, maybe a trace of meat, if the day allowed it. It tastes deeper now, not because it is different, but because you are different. Conversation begins cautiously, as if testing the air. Someone mentions the heat. Another replies with a small joke. Laughter follows, soft and brief. It feels earned. Words flow more freely now, but they remain measured. The habit of restraint does not disappear all at once. Stories surface not grand ones, but fragments. Something seen in the field. A comment overheard during the visit earlier. A child's mistake turned into humour rather than reprimand. These stories do not travel far. They belong to this small circle, this moment. One subtle habit reveals itself as you watch people eat. Bites are paced carefully. No one rushes, but no one lingers either. Food is savoured without indulgence. It is treated with respect, not hunger's desperation. You notice how people pause between mouthfuls, letting the warmth settle before continuing. The way people sit tells its own story. Bodies lean toward one another, now drawn together by shared fatigue. Proximity feels safer in the evening. The day's risks have passed. What remains is companionship, quiet and understated. Later reflections have offered different interpretations of these gatherings. Some describe them as moments of genuine community. Others point out how limited they were by exhaustion and oversight. From inside the circle, the truth feels smaller and more immediate. This is connection measured in minutes, not ideals. Children sit closer to adults, now their earlier independence replaced by tiredness. Heads rest against arms. A child falls asleep mid-bite, chin dipping forward, until someone nudges them gently awake. No one scolds. Everyone understands. A small human detail stands out. Someone breaks a piece of bread and hands half to another without comment. The exchange is natural, unremarkable. Sharing here does not need explanation. It happens because it always has. As eating continues, the pace of conversation slows. Voices drop. Silence is stretched comfortably between words. No one feels the need to fill them. The night has its own rhythm, slower, deeper. You feel yourself matching it without effort. Written accounts from the period often overlook these quiet exchanges, focusing instead on labour and control. Yet these moments carry memory. You sense it in the way people listen closely, in how they remember details shared only at night. This is when lives are acknowledged briefly before sleep takes them. Someone begins a longer story, then stops halfway through losing the thread. They laugh softly and shake their head. Fatigue wins. The story can wait. Or maybe it will never be finished. That is acceptable too. As bowls empty, people do not rush to clear them. The end of the meal stretches gently, allowing the body to register fullness. Someone wipes their hands on their trousers and leans back, slightly exhaling. The sound spreads, echoed by others, a collective release. You notice how the overseer's absence is felt more than his presence now. Attention relaxes further. Faces soften. The plantation's edge dulls just enough to allow honesty in posture, if not in words. An often unremarked detail emerges here. People plan quietly for tomorrow. Who will wake first? Who needs extra help? Which task might be difficult if the weather turns? These plans are not formal. They are exchanged casually tucked between comments about food and fatigue. The lantern light flickers, casting uneven shadows that dance across faces. Under this light, everyone looks older, gentler. Lines deepen. Expressions soften. The day's sharpness fades into warmth. You feel yourself growing heavy, not just with food, but with the accumulated weight of effort released at last. Sitting still becomes easier. Standing feels unnecessary. The body welcomes stillness now. Someone hums softly, barely audible, a tune without words. It drifts through the group and fades again. No one reacts, but you sense the comfort it brings. Sound here does not demand attention, it simply exists. As people begin to rise, movements are unhurried. Bowls are gathered. Leftovers are set aside carefully. Nothing is wasted. Even at night, planning extends forward. Tomorrow is always present, even when rest is needed. You stand slowly, feeling stiffness protest briefly before settling. The ache remains, but it feels different now. Less urgent, more manageable. The meal has done its work. As the group disperses, good nights are exchanged quietly. Not everyone speaks. A nod suffices. Connection does not require confirmation here. It is assumed carried over from one day to the next. You step away, the sounds of supper fading behind you. The night deepens. Crickets grow louder. The plantation settles into its nocturnal shape. The shared meal lingers in your body, not just as nourishment, but as proof that the day has been lived through together. You move toward your sleeping place, slowly unburdened by urgency at last. The memory of voices, warmth, and shared silence follows you. Supper has ended, but its effect remains, easing you into the quieter hours ahead. When you finally move toward where you will sleep, the plantation feels narrower than it did during the day. Paths that stretch wide under sunlight now compress in the dark, guided by memory more than sight. You step carefully, feet finding familiar ground without much thought. The body remembers routes even when the mind is tired. The cabins come into view as clusters rather than individual spaces. They sit close together, practical rather than private. Light leaks from cracks in walls and door frames, thin lines that suggest warmth inside. You hear murmurs, low laughter, the shuffle of bodies settling. Night does not silence the plantation, it lowers its voice. Inside space is shared by necessity. Beds are few, floor space is claimed carefully. People arrange themselves with practiced efficiency, making room where none seems to exist. You notice how quickly this happens, as if everyone carries an internal map of where they fit. Privacy here is measured in inches, not walls. Living quarters on plantations were typically crowded, built for durability rather than comfort. That reality makes itself known immediately. The air is thick with the smell of bodies' smoke and the day's labour. It is not unpleasant exactly, just dense. You breathe slowly, allowing your senses to adjust. A small habit stands out as people prepare to sleep. Shoes are placed carefully near the door. Tools kept close are set within reach, but not in the way. Tomorrow begins before sunrise, and preparation never truly stops. Even rest is arranged with the next day in mind. You lower yourself onto a shared sleeping surface, or the floor, feeling stiffness, protests briefly before easing. Muscles relax in stages. First the shoulders, then the back. Finally the legs, heavy and grateful. The body understands rest even if the mind is still unwinding. Conversation drifts softly across the room. Not everyone speaks. Those who do choose words carefully. Topics stay close to home. Weather, a task done well, a minor complaint framed as humour. This is not the time for big questions. Night holds what it can. Some accounts suggest that these shared spaces fostered strong communal bonds. Others point out how crowding intensified stress and illness. Both interpretations feel possible here. Closeness brings comfort and friction at the same time. You feel both as you shift slightly to make room for someone else. A quietly human detail emerges as people settle. Someone hums the same tune you heard earlier in the field, now slower, almost a lullaby. Another taps a gentle rhythm against the floor absent-mindedly. These sounds soothe without demanding attention. They help the mind let go. Children fall asleep quickly, their breathing deep and uneven. Adults take longer. You hear sighs, small adjustments. Someone clears their throat softly, then stills. Sleep arrives unevenly, rolling through the room in waves. The lantern is turned down, not fully extinguished. Darkness is partial here, shaped by safety rather than preference. Complete blackness invites accidents. Soft light keeps the space navigable even as eyes close. You become aware of how much the body carries into sleep. The ache in your hands pulses faintly. Your back holds a memory of bending. Feet tingle as blood flow shifts. These sensations do not prevent rest. They accompany it like reminders of a day completed. Later reflections have questioned whether such sleeping arrangements allowed for true recovery. The answer depends on what recovery means. From inside the moment, rest is not about renewal. It is about pause, a brief suspension before effort resumes. An easily missed behaviour reveals how people claim small comfort. A rolled cloth placed under the neck, a jacket folded to soften a hard edge. Someone turns slightly toward another for warmth. These adjustments are subtle but deliberate, learned over time. The night sounds deepen, crickets grow louder. Somewhere outside, an animal moves through brush. The cabin absorbs these noises, muffling them into background rhythm. You find your breathing sinking unconsciously slower now, steadier. Illness lingers in the air as a possibility. A cough breaks the quiet, then fades. No one comments. Concern exists, but it is managed silently. Tomorrow will bring whatever it brings. The scholarly picture remains mixed on how nights like this shaped emotional life. Some suggest they offered rare moments of freedom from oversight. Others argue the lack of solitude limited reflection. Lying here, you sense both truths. Thought drifts, but it does not roam far. Your mind wanders briefly to the day just past. The field, the yard, the visitors, the meal. Each memory rises and falls without insistence. Fatigue smooths their edges. Nothing feels sharp enough to hold on to. Someone whispers a short prayer or phrase barely audible. It is not a performance. It feels habitual, comforting to the speaker, if no one else. The words dissolve into the dark, unanswered and unchallenged. Sleep approaches unevenly. You hover at its edge, aware of your surroundings but no longer invested in them. The cabin breathes around you, a shared space settling into stillness. The smell of smoke clings to fabric and hair. It will be there in the morning too. You accept it as part of the environment, as familiar as the ache in your muscles. At some point, thought thins. Sensation fades. The last thing you notice is the rhythm of breathing nearby, a quiet chorus rising and falling. It is oddly reassuring proof that you are not alone in this pause. The plantation does not disappear at night. It sleeps lightly, keeping one eye open for dawn. You join that sleep now, body, heavy mind, quieting. Tomorrow waits, but for the moment it holds no power. Rest here is not deep or complete, but it is enough. Enough to let the body loosen. Enough to let the mind drift. Enough to carry you forward. You allow yourself to sink fully into the shared darkness, trusting that morning will find you where you are. The cabin grows still. The night wraps around the plantation, and for a few hours, effort releases you just enough to begin again. Faith does not arrive here as a grand gesture. It settles quietly into the night, woven through habit and repetition, carried more often in tone than in words. You notice it as people prepare to sleep, in the way someone pauses before lying down, in the way another touches a small object kept close. Belief here is practical. It fits into the spaces left open by fatigue. Someone murmurs a phrase you do not fully catch. Another responds with a soft sound of agreement. These exchanges are not formal. There is no gathering, no call to attention. Faith is shared sideways, passing between people without needing a centre. You feel how it steadies the room, not by promising change, but by offering continuity. On many plantations, religious practice blended traditions shaped by what people carried with them and what they learned here. This mixture shows itself in small ways, a familiar hymn hummed without words, a story retold with details altered just enough to matter. The boundaries between belief systems blur, forming something flexible and resilient. You lie still and listen. The cadence of speech slows. Words become softer, less distinct. Faith does not demand clarity. It tolerates ambiguity. It exists comfortably alongside doubt, fatigue, and unanswered questions. That coexistence feels intentional. A small detail catches your attention. Someone traces a pattern in the air before settling their hands. Another presses fingertips together briefly, then releases. These gestures are personal, learned, privately repeated, nightly. No one comments. Respect here means allowing others their quiet rituals without scrutiny. Interpretations differ on how belief functioned in spaces like this. Some suggest it offered hope of eventual deliverance. Others argue it provided structure and meaning within daily suffering. Lying here, you sense both possibilities. Hope exists, but it is cautious. Meaning exists, but it is grounded in survival rather than abstraction. Children absorb these practices effortlessly. You hear a child whisper a phrase they have clearly learned by listening rather than being taught. The words tumble together imperfectly, but the intention is clear. Faith is learned the same way everything else is learned here, through proximity and imitation. The room grows darker as the lantern dims further. Shadows soften. Faces disappear into outlines. In this reduced light, belief feels closer, less performative. There is no audience now. What remains is whatever helps people face another dawn. An often overlooked aspect of faith here is its adaptability. When circumstances change, belief shifts with them. Prayers adjust. Stories evolve. What remains consistent is the need to make sense of endurance. Faith offers language for that need, even when answers remain distant. You notice how illness and hardship shape these moments. Someone coughs softly, another shifts to ease a stiff joint. Faith does not remove pain, but it offers a way to hold it. The words spoken tonight are not about avoiding suffering. They are about carrying it. A quietly human habit appears as the room settles further. Someone thanks another for something small, a shared blanket, a spot on the floor. Gratitude becomes part of belief, expressed in immediate terms rather than grand promises. This grounding keeps faith close to daily life. The scholarly conversation around religion in plantation communities remains complex. Some accounts emphasize control imposed through organized worship. Others highlight how enslaved people reshape belief into something sustaining and private. From where you rest, the private aspect feels dominant. Faith here belongs to those who practice it, not to those who observe it. You find your breathing slowing again, matching the pace of the room. Thought drifts toward images rather than words. A river remembered, a voice from childhood, a place imagined rather than seen. Faith blurs with memory, with longing, with rest. Someone nearby begins a soft call, almost a question. Another answers quietly. The exchange feels ancient, though you know it is shaped by the present. These moments carry history forward without naming it, pass from night to night, body to body. The night deepens. Outside the sounds shift again. Insects change rhythm. A distant animal calls. The cabin absorbs these noises, turning them into a steady backdrop. Faith fits into this soundscape naturally, another layer rather than a separate act. You feel how belief allows the mind to loosen its grip on control. Tomorrow remains uncertain. The system remains unchanged. Faith does not deny this. It simply offers a way to sleep anyway. That permission feels significant. A fleeting thought passes through you. That hope here is not loud. It does not shout about freedom or transformation. It whispers about endurance, about making it through another day, about holding on to selfhood quietly. This hope feels modest, but it is persistent. Later writers have argued about whether such hope limited resistance or sustained it. The question remains unresolved. From inside this moment, hope feels like breath, necessary, unremarkable, impossible to do without. You turn slightly, finding a position that eases your back. Someone nearby shifts in response, making space without waking fully. This cooperation continues even in sleep, a shared understanding carried into rest. As the last murmured words fade, silence settles more fully. Not empty silence, but a held quiet filled with breath and presence. Faith recedes into the background, doing its work without demanding attention. Your thoughts slow further. Images soften. The day loosens its hold. Whatever belief you carry now does not need to be defined. It exists as a feeling of steadiness, of being held in something larger than the immediate struggle. Sleep approaches gently. The cabin grows still. The plantation rests lightly, never fully at ease, but quiet enough for now. You let yourself drift, trusting that whatever you believe will be there when you wake, waiting in the same quiet way. For this moment, faith does not ask you to be strong or hopeful or certain. It asks only that you rest. You accept that invitation, allowing the night to carry you, knowing that morning will arrive soon enough. Night settles into the plantation with a texture all its own. It is not the clean darkness of empty countryside, nor the restless glow of a town that refuses to sleep. This darkness listens. It carries sound farther than you expect, shaping the way you lie still and pay attention. The first thing you notice is how alive the night is. Insects take over where human voices leave off. Crickets pulse in steady waves. Cicadas rise and fall like breathing. Somewhere farther out, a frog calls, answered by another you cannot locate. The sounds overlap without clashing, forming a loose rhythm that fills the spaces between cabins. You lie awake longer than you thought you would, not because sleep avoids you, but because the quiet invites awareness. During the day, sound competed for your attention. At night, each noise arrives clearly unchallenged. A footstep on packed earth, the creak of wood as someone shifts nearby, a distant cough carried across the dark. The plantation after sunset operates under different rules. Movement continues, but it is selective. Those who walk do so with purpose. Wandering draws notice. You sense this even while lying still and understanding, learned without explanation. Night allows some freedom, but it sharpens boundaries at the same time. You hear a voice outside, low and cautious. It does not rise above the insect noise. The words are indistinct, but the tone suggests familiarity. Someone laughs softly, quickly, silencing themselves. Sound here is negotiated. Everyone knows how far it should travel. Many descriptions from the period mention how nights could feel both safer and more dangerous than daylight. The absence of constant oversight offers relief. At the same time, darkness hides risks. You feel both realities at once, even as you remain where you are. A small, easily missed habit appears when someone steps outside a cabin. They pause first, listening, not looking, listening. Only after assessing the night do they move. You realize how much information sound carries here. Footsteps reveal direction. Voices reveal proximity. Silence itself can signal presence. The smell of night is different too. Smoke from cooking fires lingers longer, heavier, without the sun to lift it. Damp earth releases a cooler scent. Sweat dries more slowly. The air feels thicker, closer to the skin. You breathe it in, recognizing it as part of the place. Some nights carry tension more strongly than others. You sense it in the way voices remain low, in how movement is restrained. Tonight feels quieter, more settled. That does not mean safe. It means routine has asserted itself. Later interpretations of plantation life have struggled to capture this atmosphere. Daytime labour is easier to document. Night resists neat description. It is fluid, shaped by sound, shadow and awareness. Lying here, you understand why accounts differ so much. Experience changes with every rustle. A brief sound interrupts the insect chorus. The snap of a twig. You hold your breath for a moment without meaning to. Then nothing follows. The chorus resumes unbothered. Your body releases tension slowly, as if unsure whether it was necessary in the first place. Someone nearby whispers to another the words too soft to understand. The exchange feels practical rather than secretive. A reminder, a warning, a simple check. Night communication favours efficiency. Too much talking invites curiosity. You become aware of how carefully people manage light. A lantern shifts position, its glow reduced further. Light attracts attention. Darkness offers cover. Even indoors, illumination is controlled thoughtfully, enough to move safely, not enough to announce. A detail preserved in scattered recollections describes how people learn to read night sounds as indicators of change. A different insect call could signal weather. An unfamiliar footstep could signal danger. You find yourself listening in the same way even without knowing what each sound means. Your eyes adjust gradually, shapes emerge, the outline of a doorframe, the slanted line of the roof, the faint movement of someone turning in their sleep. Vision here is secondary, hearing leads, touch follows. The plantation does not sleep deeply, it rests in layers. Some bodies fall into heavy sleep quickly, others remain alert longer, listening, waiting. You sense this shared vigilance even as you lie still. Night asks for awareness even in rest. A dog barks once in the distance, then stops. The sound carries farther than it would during the day. You wait for another bark that does not come. The night absorbs it, smoothing its edges. People have debated whether nights offered opportunities for quiet autonomy or merely extended the reach of control into darkness. The truth seems to shift with circumstance. Tonight, the night feels permissive but cautious. It allows breath, not recklessness. You hear someone return from outside, steps careful, familiar. The door opens and closes softly. No one speaks. The sound is enough to announce safety. Routine resumes. Your thoughts begin to slow again, drawn into the steady rhythm of insects and distant movement. The day feels farther away now, as if it belonged to someone else. Muscles still ache, but the pain has softened, dulled by stillness. A faint breeze finds its way inside cooling skin, just enough to notice. You shift slightly, adjusting fabric. The movement feels loud in your own ears, though you know it is not. Sensitivity heightens at night. Everything feels closer. Somewhere beyond the cabins, the land stretches wide and unseen. Fields you worked earlier now exist as dark shapes, their rows invisible but remembered. The night holds them without judgment. Work does not exist here, only space. A quiet realization settles in. Night is when imagination has more room, worries stretch, memories drift, hopes surface briefly, then recede. You allow these thoughts to pass without holding onto them. Fatigue makes them gentle. Another sound passes through the dark. Laughter again, distant and brief. It feels softer than during the day, less guarded. Night changes tone. It allows emotion to appear and disappear without consequence. The insects continue their work tirelessly. Their rhythm does not care about human schedules. It offers consistency. You find comfort in that. Something here continues no matter what tomorrow brings. Your breathing slows further. The night sounds begin to blur together, forming a steady backdrop. Individual noises matter less now. The whole carries you. Before sleep takes you fully, you register one last detail. Someone nearby shifts and exhales deeply, the sound of a body finally letting go. That release spreads subtly, permission granted without words. The plantation holds its breath lightly through the night, alert but not strained. You drift with it, balanced between awareness and rest. The sounds continue layered and steady, guarding the hours until dawn. Sleep comes quietly, at last, not as a sudden drop, but as a gradual dimming. The night keeps watch in its own way. You allow yourself to sink into it, trusting that the sounds you hear now will guide you safely through the dark until morning finds you again. Night has rules even when no one speaks them aloud. You feel those rules in the way people move less, in the way doors close, more gently, in the way a whisper seems to carry farther than a normal voice ever should. The plantation's darkness is not empty. It is organized, watched in its own quiet way. You step outside briefly, or you simply imagine stepping out because the feeling is the same. The air is cooler but not cold. It clings to your skin damp with the memory of the day. Light is scarce. A lantern here. A weak glow there. Most of the world remains hidden, which changes how you behave immediately. You place your feet more carefully. You listen before you move. There are places you are not meant to be after sunset. You know this without being told directly. Some pathways feel permitted, worn by routine. Others feel wrong, as if the darkness itself resists you. You notice how certain directions simply are not taken. The absence of footsteps becomes its own warning. On plantations like this, nighttime movement was often restricted, controlled through custom supervision and the practical limits of darkness. That pattern explains why people cluster close to cabins and familiar routes. It is easier to stay where you belong than to test boundaries you cannot see. A small habit appears as you watch the night unfold. People carry sound differently. If they must speak, they face inward toward a doorway or lean close so words do not travel. If they must walk, they step where the ground is soft, avoiding the sharp crunch of gravel or dry leaves. Sound becomes something you manage like a tool. You notice how quickly your own body responds to this environment. Shoulders rise slightly, breath shortens, eyes strain to make shapes meaningful. The night teaches caution even before fear enters. It is not panic. It is awareness sharpened to a fine point. Some nights, the darkness feels like protection. Other nights, it feels like exposure. The difference can depend on a single factor: who is nearby, whether a dog is restless, whether a voice carries from a distance you cannot measure. You sense how easily the same night can be read as freedom or threat, depending on where you stand within the plantation's order. A quietly strange detail surfaces. Someone keeps a small bundle near the door ready to grab if needed. Not valuables, not showy items, but essentials. a piece of cloth, a bit of food, something that suggests preparation for sudden movement. You do not ask, you understand that readiness is a habit here. The darkness carries stories. You hear them in fragments, a warning shared softly, a name mentioned then dropped, a place referenced indirectly. People do not describe danger in full, they gesture toward it. That is enough. Lantern light shifts as someone moves it, and shadows slide across the ground like water. The motion makes you pause. For a moment the shape could be anything, then it resolves into something ordinary, and your body releases tension slowly. You realize how much the night relies on imagination, how quickly the mind fills gaps when sight fails. Dogs matter more after sunset. A bark is information. A silence where barking is expected can be information too. You listen for patterns. One bark, then nothing might mean nothing. Repeated barking might mean someone unfamiliar is moving. Even when you cannot see, you can tell the night is being monitored through sound. It is hard to know how much of this night control is formal policy and how much is lived habit passed down because it worked. The effect, however, is unmistakable. People behave differently. They conserve visibility. They minimize sound. They stay close to what feels known. A fleeting moment reveals how rules are enforced without confrontation. Someone begins to walk in a direction that feels wrong. Another person makes a small sound, not a call, more like a soft click of the tongue. The walker pauses, shifts course, and continues. No words exchanged. No correction spoken aloud. The message is delivered anyway. Even within restriction, night makes room for small freedoms. A longer conversation than the day allows. A laugh that lasts a second too long. A shared story told in fragments. These freedoms remain close to the ground, careful not to rise high enough to be noticed. You feel the pull of sleep, but you remain alert as if rest must be earned fully. Your mind stays tuned to sound. A footstep outside, the creak of wood, a distant voice. Each noise is weighed, judged, released. The boundaries of the plantation are invisible now, but you can feel them. You can sense where the cabins end and open land begins. Beyond that, fields stretch into darkness. Further still, roads run toward places you cannot see. The idea of travel feels both near and impossible. A small, slightly irrational habit appears in yourself. You count breaths, not deliberately at first, but then with intention. Counting becomes a way to steady the mind, to remind the body that it is safe enough for now. Night can be generous. It can soften the day's edges, allow muscles to loosen, permit thoughts to drift. But it can also sharpen anxiety, make every sound feel like a question. You sense both possibilities hovering, and you navigate between them with care. Eventually you return indoors, or you settle deeper into stillness. The cabin's darkness feels warmer than the outside dark. It has human breath in it, familiar smells, the soft rustle of fabric, the sense of belonging to a cluster rather than being alone in open space. You lie back again, letting the rules of night hold you not as comfort but as structure. The plantation rests lightly, never fully surrendering to sleep. You do the same. As your eyes close, you listen one last time. The night continues. Crickets, distant steps, a dog's quiet shift in the yard. The rules remain in place, unseen but felt. Then slowly awareness fades. The sounds blur. The body releases its tightness in stages. Night does what it always does here. It keeps watch. It makes space. It holds you in cautious quiet until morning arrives. Sleep does not arrive all at once. It circles first, testing the edges of your awareness, pulling you under, and then releasing you again. You drift in shallow waves, half present, half elsewhere. Dreams begin to form not as stories, but as sensations. Heat, weight, movement without direction. When you wake briefly, it is not with alarm, but with familiarity. The cabin breathes around you. Someone shifts. Another turns and sighs. The sounds are reassuring because they are known. You are not alone with your thoughts. That matters more at night than during the day. Dreams here are shaped by routine. You find yourself walking rows that never end, reaching for tools that feel heavier than they should. Sometimes the work continues smoothly. Other times something goes wrong. A row disappears. A tool slips. You wake with your heart beating faster, then realise nothing has happened. The body remembers effort even when the mind rests. People who lived this life often spoke later of dreams that felt indistinguishable from waking hours. The repetition of labour pressed itself so deeply into the body that it followed them into sleep. You understand this now. Rest does not erase the day. It rearranges it. A small habit appears when someone wakes from a bad dream. They sit up just enough to change position, grounding themselves again. A hand presses to the floor. Fingers curl into cloth. The physical world reassures the mind that it is still here, still solid. Fears surface more easily at night. The mind has room to wander. Thoughts stretch into places they could not go during daylight. You think about tomorrow, about mistakes that might be made, about bodies that may not hold up forever. These thoughts arrive quietly and leave the same way. There are also gentler dreams, a remembered voice, a place imagined rather than real, a moment of ease that does not exist during the day. These dreams feel almost fragile, dissolving the moment you try to hold on to them. You let them pass without chasing. Later observers struggled to agree on whether nights offered true mental escape or simply extended the pressures of the day. From inside the experience, both feel possible. Some nights sleep brings relief. Other nights it brings rehearsal. You cannot predict which kind you will get. You notice how people sleep differently depending on age and exhaustion. Children surrender quickly, falling into deep stillness. Adults remain lighter, waking more easily to sound. Experience teaches caution even in rest. A faint sound outside pulls you back toward wakefulness. You listen carefully. A branch settling, an animal moving through grass. Nothing that demands response. Still, your body remains alert a moment longer before relaxing again. Vigilance has become automatic. An odd but familiar detail emerges. Someone speaks in their sleep a few words without context. The words are not alarming, they are practical. Instructions, names, work echoes itself even here. No one reacts. This is understood. You turn slightly, finding a position that eases your shoulder. The movement wakes you more fully for a moment, then you settle again. Comfort is not perfect here. It is negotiated, adjusted through small changes rather than achieved outright. As sleep deepens again, dreams blur into something softer. Sensation replaces narrative. You float between awareness and rest, held by the steady rhythm of breathing around you. The plantation feels distant now, reduced to sound and presence rather than obligation. Somewhere in the night, rain threatens. You smell it before you hear it. The air shifts, humidity rises. A few drops strike the roof, then stop. You wait listening. The pause stretches, then nothing more comes. Even the weather feels uncertain here. The mind loosens further. Thoughts arrive without urgency. You do not follow them. Fatigue smooths their edges. Worry loses its sharpness. Whatever tomorrow holds feels far away enough not to matter for now. A deeper sleep finally claims you. Muscles release more fully. Breathing evens out. The body takes what rest it can, knowing it will not get enough, but accepting it anyway. This acceptance feels practiced. Near dawn, dreams change again. Light enters them subtly. Shapes brighten. Movement slows. You sense morning before you wake, not through sound, but through absence. The night insects quiet. The air cools slightly. You shift once more, still asleep, turning toward the coming day without knowing it. The plantation waits for dawn, the same way it always does, lightly resting, never fully at ease. For now, sleep holds you. It does not heal everything. It does not promise ease, but it offers pause, and pause is enough. You remain suspended there between night and morning, between exhaustion and renewal, carried forward quietly toward whatever waits next. Morning does not arrive as a clean break. It seeps in gradually, touching the edges of sleep before the mind is ready to follow. You sense it first as a thinning of darkness, a softening of the air. The night sounds fade unevenly. Crickets quiet. Something stirs farther off. Your body responds before thought forms, shifting slightly, preparing without instruction. When you open your eyes, the cabin looks different. Not brighter exactly, but more defined. Shapes sharpen. The ceiling feels closer. You recognize the space again, grounded in its limits. Sleep has loosened its hold, but it has not restored everything. You feel that immediately. Muscles remain stiff. The weight of yesterday has not vanished. It has simply been folded away long enough to allow movement. This is how days often stack here, one laid directly atop the last. There is no clear separation, no sense of reset. Morning builds on what remains. You stretch carefully, testing what your body will allow. Some movements come easily, others protest. You make note of these reactions, quietly adjusting expectations without comment. Outside the plantation wakes in layers. A door opens. A bucket scrapes against stone. Footsteps pass, then recede. No one calls out good morning. Greetings feel unnecessary when routine already binds everyone together. You rise because others are rising. That is enough. Patterns like this repeat across seasons. Days blend into weeks. Weeks into months. The cycle is reliable even when outcomes are not. You sense how time here is measured less by calendars than by bodily memory. How many mornings your back feels like this? How many evenings it takes to recover? A small but telling habit appears as people step out into the early light. They pause just briefly as if orienting themselves, facing the sky, testing the air. The day announces itself through temperature, through smell, through the quality of light. These details inform everything that follows. You notice how conversation returns cautiously, still thin with sleep. Words are fewer, slower. The day has not yet demanded explanation. People move through early tasks with minimal sound, conserving energy even before it is spent. As light strengthens, the plantation resumes its familiar posture. Tools emerge. Paths fill. The order reasserts itself without instruction. Yesterday's exhaustion becomes today's baseline. You feel how quickly the body accepts this. Complaints fade before they reach the surface. Some accounts suggest that monotony was the most exhausting part of life here. Others emphasize unpredictability. Standing in the early light, you sense both. The rhythm repeats, but each day carries small differences that demand attention. A sore muscle, a change in weather, a missing person. Adaptation is constant. A quiet moment stays with you as the morning unfolds. Someone rubs their eyes and laughs softly, surprised by the sound. It fades quickly, but it signals something human still present beneath routine. You hold on to that moment as you move. Children appear again, yawning, rubbing faces, already stepping into roles that will fill the day. They learn the cycle early. Morning means movement. Hesitation lingers only until the first task begins. You feel the weight of continuity settle in, the knowledge that this day will resemble the last and the one before that. There is comfort in predictability, but also a subtle heaviness. Change feels distant. Stability here is not chosen, it is imposed. Later reflections often struggle to capture how people endured such repetition. Some suggest routine dulled awareness. Others argue it sharpened attention to small variations. From inside the morning, the latter feels closer. You notice everything because small differences matter. A blister, a cloud pattern, a shift in mood. The smell of damp earth returns as dew lifts. It mixes with smoke and sweat already forming. The sensory world rebuilds itself quickly. You step into it, senses adjusting without resistance. This environment feels known now, even if it is not kind. A fleeting behaviour catches your attention. Someone adjusts another's clothing briefly, smoothing fabric, tightening a knot. The gesture is practical caring without sentiment. It prepares the body for work. It acknowledges shared understanding. As the sun clears the horizon, the day asserts itself fully. Yesterday feels both close and distant, folded into muscle memory. You carry it forward without comment. There is no ceremony marking the start. Work begins because it always does. You move with the group, feeling the rhythm return to your steps. The yard fills. The fields wait. The cycle continues. What stands out now is not the labour itself, but the endurance that underpins it. The ability to wake, adjust, and begin again. Questions about long-term resilience often arise in discussions of lives like this. How did people persist? What sustained them? The answers vary. From here, persistence feels less like choice and more like momentum. Once set in motion, stopping feels harder than continuing. You glance upward briefly, noting the colour of the sky. It will be hot again. You prepare, mentally adjusting pace before the work even begins. Anticipation becomes a skill. Another day takes shape around you, familiar, demanding, unremarkable. You step into it, not with hope or dread, but with acceptance. The cycle does not ask how you feel. It asks only that you participate. As morning settles fully, yesterday dissolves into today. The plantation resumes its steady pull. You move forward with it, carrying what rest you could take, knowing it will have to be enough. Defiance here does not announce itself. It slips through the day quietly, often mistaken for habit or chance. You begin to notice it only after living inside the routine long enough to recognise what does not quite fit. A pause taken at the edge of permission, a choice made that serves dignity more than efficiency. It might be as small as adjusting the pace of your work when eyes are elsewhere, or as subtle as choosing when to speak and when to remain silent. These decisions feel ordinary on the surface, yet they carry weight. They remind you that even inside tight boundaries, the self still negotiates. The structure of plantation life leaves little room for open refusal. That reality shapes how resistance appears. It favours quiet over spectacle, patience over confrontation. You sense how people learn to bend rather than break, preserving something essential without inviting immediate consequence. A fleeting habit stands out as you watch closely. Someone repairs an item more carefully than required, making it last longer than expected. Another teaches a child a task just slightly differently, passing on knowledge that will help later. These acts do not stop the system, they soften its impact. The record left behind does not always capture these moments. Official documents focus on compliance and output. Personal memories, when they survive, hint at something else. A daily effort to assert control over time, over body, over meaning. You feel that effort now woven into routine. You notice how humour functions in this space. Jokes are brief, often private, shared between two people rather than broadcast. Laughter appears and disappears quickly. It offers release without lingering long enough to attract attention. Humour becomes a way to reclaim perspective, even briefly. An overlooked detail reveals itself in the way names are used. Certain names are spoken fully carefully in moments of trust. Others are shortened or avoided. Naming becomes an act of recognition. Choosing how to address someone carries meaning beyond politeness. Later interpretations have disagreed on whether such small acts constituted meaningful resistance or simply coping. The distinction feels less important from inside the experience. What matters is how these acts feel to the person performing them. They restore a sense of authorship, however limited. You feel this most strongly in moments of choice that go unnoticed. Deciding where to sit, who to stand beside, how to arrange your few belongings. These decisions seem trivial, but they shape how the day touches you. They mark space as yours, if only briefly. Children participate in these patterns instinctively. They learn which games can be played quietly, which questions can be asked safely, which stories can be told only at night. Play adapts to circumstance. Creativity finds narrow channels. A small, almost invisible exchange catches your attention. Someone passes an object hand to hand, not out of necessity, but out of trust. The object itself matters less than the gesture. It signals connection, continuity, something shared that exists outside the system's accounting. The rhythm of the day continues around these acts without pause. Work does not stop. Orders are followed. On the surface, nothing changes. Yet beneath that surface, life reshapes itself continuously, adjusting pressure points to preserve balance. Some nights, these quiet acts feel enough. Other nights, they feel painfully small. Both experiences are true. You sense how endurance is built not from grand victories, but from accumulation. One small assertion layered on another. You notice how people remember these moments, not in lists, not as events, but as feelings, a sense of having been seen, of having chosen something, of having mattered even briefly. Memory holds onto that long after details fade. The day moves towards its end again. You carry these observations with you not as comfort, but as understanding. Resistance here is not loud. It does not promise change, it promises survival with self intact. As evening approaches, you see the same subtle negotiations begin anew. Someone slows slightly, someone shares quietly, someone corrects gently rather than sharply. The pattern repeats, varied just enough to remain alive. You realise that defiance here is not about stopping the machine. It is about refusing to disappear inside it. It is about maintaining presence, however constrained. You lower your gaze and continue, hands moving in familiar rhythm. The work proceeds, the system holds, and within it, these small acts persist, carried forward from one day to the next, shaping lives in ways that never appear in records, but remain deeply real. Time settles into the body here long before it shows itself anywhere else. You notice it first in the way people move more carefully than they once did, in how they shift weight before lifting, in how they pause not out of hesitation, but out of calculation. Age announces itself quietly on this plantation, measured less by years than by wear. You watch older bodies navigate the same spaces as younger ones using different strategies. Steps are shorter. Movements are more deliberate. Strength is spent only where it matters. Nothing is wasted. Experience has taught restraint as a form of survival. There is a knowledge that accumulates over time, not written down, not taught formally. It lives in posture and timing. An older hand knows when to push and when to yield, knows which aches can be ignored and which signal danger. This knowledge keeps people working long after raw strength fades. You notice how respect operates here. It is not spoken loudly, but it exists. Younger people make room without being asked. Tasks are adjusted subtly. A heavier load is taken by someone else when possible. These gestures are not framed as kindness. They are practical acknowledgements of shared dependence. The plantation's rhythm does not slow for age, but individuals learn how to fit themselves into it differently. Someone who once worked the longest rows now takes on tasks closer to home. Someone who once lifted without thought now supervises a process, watching for mistakes rather than making the motions themselves. Later accounts sometimes describe older age here as a kind of invisibility. Yet standing among these interactions, you see something else as well. Visibility changes shape. It becomes quieter, less obvious, but still present. Authority emerges not from position, but from memory. A small behaviour reveals this clearly. When an older person speaks, others listen even if the words are few. Advice is given without flourish. A suggestion offered once. It carries weight because it has been tested repeatedly over time. You notice how memory is treated. Stories are not told for entertainment. They are told for instruction. Someone recalls a year when the heat came earlier than expected. Another remembers a storm that changed everything. These recollections guide present choices, anchoring them in lived experience. The body records time in places the mind cannot ignore. Hands stiffen, knees ache, backs complain more loudly in the morning. You watch people work through these sensations with patience rather than frustration. Pain is familiar. It has been negotiated with for years. There is an unspoken understanding that not everyone will age the same way here. Some bodies wear out faster. Some last longer than expected. The reasons are complex and uneven. Work type, health, luck. You sense how people adjust expectations quietly, aware that the future is uncertain. A fleeting habit appears near the end of the day. Older individuals stretch more deliberately, pressing hands into walls, rolling shoulders slowly. These movements look unremarkable, but they protect tomorrow. Maintenance becomes as important as output. The question of how aging was experienced under such conditions has produced many interpretations. Some emphasize endurance and adaptation, others highlight decline and loss. From inside the day, both feel true. Aging brings knowledge and constraint in equal measure. You notice how older people often take responsibility for calming conflict. a glance, a word spoken at the right moment. Tension dissolves without escalation. Experience teaches when to intervene and when to remain silent. This skill is valued quietly. Children watch these elders closely, learning not just tasks, but demeanour, how to hold oneself, how to respond to frustration, how to keep moving when the body resists. Lessons are absorbed through proximity rather than instruction. There is also weariness that settles deeper than physical fatigue, a mental heaviness shaped by repetition. You see it in the way some older faces carry a distant look, as if part of them is already elsewhere. This weariness does not stop them from working. It changes how they carry the work. A small human detail stands out. Someone pauses to rub an old scar absent-mindedly. The scar tells a story without words. It marks a moment that shaped everything after it. You realise how many such stories exist here, written into bodies rather than records. Evenings bring different challenges for ageing bodies. Stiffness increases, recovery slows. You see how people prepare for this in advance. Extra cloth folded for warmth, a sleeping spot chosen carefully. The night is managed as thoughtfully as the day. Despite these challenges, there is humour. It surfaces unexpectedly, often self-directed. A comment about old bones, a wry observation about the weather. Laughter here does not deny difficulty, it acknowledges it and moves on. The plantation does not honour age formally, but it depends on it deeply. Without memory, mistakes repeat. Without experience, survival becomes harder. You sense this dependence in small ways, in how decisions lean on those who have seen more days like this one. As the sun lowers again, the day closes around familiar patterns. Older bodies move a little slower, but they move with purpose. They know which motions matter most. They conserve energy without appearing to withdraw. You reflect on how time accumulates here, not as progress, but as layering. Each year adds another layer of knowledge, another set of limits, another reason to adapt. Aging becomes a skill in itself. Later reflections sometimes frame aging under these conditions as tragic. That interpretation holds truth. It also misses the resilience that develops alongside loss. You see how people redefine usefulness, redefining dignity in the process. As night approaches, older individuals settle into spaces they know well. Familiar routes, familiar resting places. Routine becomes comfort when uncertainty grows elsewhere. You feel how these patterns support not just the body, but the mind. The day ends again as it always does. Another layer added. Another cycle completed. You carry this awareness with you as you rest, understanding that life here is measured not by milestones, but by endurance over time. Age leaves its mark everywhere on the plantation, in bodies, in habits, in memory. You lie still and feel your own body carry the weight of days past and days to come. Time does not pause here. It accumulates quietly, shaping everything it touches. Night returns one last time, not as something new, but as something familiar, settling back into place. You feel it in your bones now, the way darkness closes around the plantation with practiced ease. Nothing resists it. The day releases its hold without argument. Work is done. What remains is reflection, quiet, and the slow gathering of thought. You lie still and sense the unequal lives that surround you, layered close together, yet separated by invisible distances. Cabins clustered tightly, the big house set apart, paths worn smooth by certain feet and avoided by others. In daylight, these differences are obvious. At night they soften just enough to feel almost blurred, though never erased. Breathing becomes the loudest sound nearby. slow, uneven, human. You hear it rise and fall around you, a reminder that survival here is collective, even when suffering is not evenly shared. Everyone rests under the same sky. Everyone wakes to different expectations. The structure of plantation life only makes sense because inequality is treated as normal. That assumption shapes everything: where people sleep, how they eat, how they move. Even in rest, the boundaries persist. You feel them without seeing them, like lines drawn into the air. As you lie there, memory drifts through the day you have lived. Dawn on the porch, the bell, the fields, the heat, the songs, the watching eyes, the shared meals, the quiet care. None of it stands alone. Each moment connects to the next, forming a chain that pulls people forward, whether they want to move or not. You notice how the mind searches for meaning in repetition. It looks for patterns that promise something beyond endurance. Sometimes it finds them. Sometimes it settles for familiarity. Familiarity becomes its own form of comfort when change feels unreachable. There are many ways to describe what daily life here is like: harsh, controlled, exhausting. Those words fit, but they do not tell the whole story. They miss the small negotiations, the quiet skills, the ways people shape moments inside narrow limits. You have felt those moments today, fleeting but real. Some later interpretations emphasize cruelty alone. Others try to highlight resilience. The truth sits uncomfortably between them. Resilience does not erase harm. Harm does not eliminate humanity. Both exist together, tangle shaping every hour. You think about tomorrow, not with anticipation, but with acceptance. Morning will come. The cycle will repeat. People will wake, adjust, and move again. This knowledge feels heavy, but it also feels settled. Uncertainty would be worse. A small sound passes through the dark. Someone turns over. Someone exhales deeply. The plantation breathes as one uneven body holding itself together through habit and necessity. You realize that what defines life here is not any single dramatic moment, but accumulation. Days layered on days. Effort layered on effort, memory layered into muscle and bone. Change happens slowly, if at all. Endurance happens daily. As sleep pulls you closer, you let the edges of the world soften. The distinctions remain, but they fade slightly at this hour. Darkness equalizes just enough to offer rest without justice. That is what the night gives. No more, no less. You close your eyes fully now, feeling the weight of the day settle into the ground beneath you. The plantation holds still, waiting for dawn. You drift with it, knowing that this life, unequal and unrelenting, continues, whether observed or not. For now, the night allows quiet. It allows pause. It allows breath. And in that small allowance, people survive another day. Wind down. Now the story loosens its grip and the plantation fades into something softer, more distant. The sounds that once demanded attention blend together, losing their sharp edges. Crickets become a steady hush. Breathing turns into rhythm rather than effort. Even memory begins to dim. You no longer need to hold the details tightly. You can let them drift, one by one, like lantern light receding down a long path. The heat fades first, then the ache, then the sense of watching eyes. What remains is stillness, wide and quiet. You have walked a full day inside this place. You have felt its weight, its repetition, its quiet human moments. Now you are allowed to set it down. Nothing more is asked of you here. No work, no vigilance, no adjustment. Your body settles deeper, finding its own comfort. Muscles release without instruction. Breathing slows naturally. Thoughts stretch out and thin, no longer forming complete sentences. Just impressions, just warmth, just rest. The plantation exists now only as a distant image, softened by night and time. You are no longer inside it. You are safe where you are. The story has done its work. Let your attention drift away from the fields, from the cabins, from the long day that began at dawn. Let sleep arrive gently without effort. There is nothing left to understand, nothing left to carry. The night is quiet now. You are quiet too. Sweet dreams.